Oh, hey, good morning, Emma. I'm working on some grease spots from old oil on top of the machine, and it is literally galvanized. Let me show you kind of what I'm plugging on here. See across the top here, you get these little oil rings that develop, and you got to try to soften the look of them without totally destroying the patina. And the stuff is really resistant. So I've done some work on this one already. It's looking better, but I'm trying to touch up these spots a little bit as well before I send the machine back to the owner. And it's a different phase process that I use. I use a combination of diluted Goo Gone, kerosene, toothpaste, and also a little bit of this stuff as well. Just a real light touch, real light touch. And this steel wool that I'm using is not as fine as you can get it, but it's definitely not a coarse type steel wool. hard to see maybe, but it's starting to soften up in the appearance already quite a bit. And if you look at it like this, you can see the difference between these two. But this oil is not a simple, wipe it off. It gets down into the pigment of the clear coat, and it's really, really tough to get rid of this stuff. Here you can see it on the end in particular. But I'll do some more work on this before I send the machine back, just because it's such a beautiful machine, and these oil stains on top kind of take away from it, don't they? So if you're not familiar with this particular Swedish beauty, this is one of the machines that followed the 1950 model Class 20s, 21s, and they stepped into this realm because they wanted to offer an alternative to inserting those black cams. They wanted to offer an alternative to a straight stitch only rotary machine. So they built this machine, which has the cam stack engineered into the back of it. So you never have to put a cam in this machine. And this particular machine is used or was used before it broke down by NGD Veterinary Relief, which is out of Medina, Ohio. And they do a lot of great work to help critters out there in Ohio using this particular machine. They haven't been able to do it because while Nancy Deucker was using it, it just died. And as we go through the progress shots on Facebook, you'll see some of the challenges that I had to overcome, one of which could have resulted in a significant fire or even damage to the machine because the power junction point at the back of the machine near the motor was cracked in several places, and it could have caused those electrical points to ground out. So I'm really glad that I dig as deep as I do so I could find that and resolve it before it went back to Nancy out in Ohio. So, and I should mention as well, this, like a lot of people like naming their machines, right? This particular machine is affectionately named Miss Betsy. And I didn't ask Nancy specifically why she calls this machine Miss Betsy, but that's the name. So there you go. Yeah, I've never been. I don't know anything about Medina, Ohio at all. So if anybody wants to look it up and type in the chat some interesting facts about Medina, Ohio. It's spelled MEDINA, Medina, Ohio. Yeah. Or if you want to look up NGD Veterinary Relief too, NGD, N like Nancy, G like George, D like David, Veterinary Relief. Yeah. My first gravity test of the day. Well, you can see I did some, once I got the machine done, I did some testing on saddle grade leather. Those are some of the stitch offs I got. And again, this is not going to have as many stitch options as the other green machines that take the black cams, but it's going to give you a 3-point zigzag. It's going to give you a blind hem, give you kind of a snaky stitch as well that you can kind of generate, kind of a stretch style stitch. And then obviously the different versions of the zigzag and the straight stitch. And what I have the machine set up with today is a Schmetz universal size 9014. And we're back to that tri-lobal by Coates & Clark embroidery thread. I really enjoy that stuff, and especially on this color leather, it just presents incredibly well, doesn't it? The lighting's not so great over here, so I'll do my best to show it to you. But when I got this machine, it was actually set up, and I think I show this in the Facebook shots as well. It was set up with an upper tension that originally would have been either on a Japanese clone machine, or they also built one similar to this for the Singer machines too. And you don't want to be swapping out upper tensions, especially on Husqvarna machines, because you're going to experience problems. And that may have been part of the trouble that Nancy was having with this machine as far as its sewing. But I ended up replacing it with an original class 20 style upper tension unit. This is one of those where it doesn't have a fixed range, but instead you basically, like a combination lock, you can turn it around and around and around and around until you reach that maximum point to continue to bolster up that upper tension. And even though this is a 19E special, as you can see on the front of the machine here, it's going to have all the same attributes that everyone loves on the 21As. It's going to have the slow gear, which we'll use during this live stream today. It's going to have the jam-free raceway that you can access down here. And it's going to have that wonderful original Swedish motor. These 19 series machines came with 1.5 and 1 amp motors. This particular one that belongs to Nancy has a 1 amp motor on it. But I've said it before, once I get done optimizing a machine, it's not going to matter whether it has a 1.5 or a 1 amp. Anything that you can put underneath that presser foot, it's going to get the job done. So what I'd like to start with is some of the progress shots to kind of show you what I took this machine through. And then let's jump into some actual sewing on this 1964 Viking Husqvarna 19E Special. One of my favorite machines, an absolute classic. And again, for the person that doesn't like jumbling around with those cams all the time, has that wonderful feature where you can simply turn this knob and select your stitch because it has a built-in cam stack. And you'll see part of that engineering in the progress shots as well. So let me shift the laptop over and we'll get set up on Facebook so we can take a look at some of these progress shots. We'll probably kind of bounce back and forth a little bit, you know what I mean? Turn the music way down. Oh, good morning, Sonny. I already said good morning to Emma, but good morning and good morning to the rest of our friends that haven't joined the live chat yet, but I hope you decide to. It's so much fun to meet people from around the world that join these live streams and premieres and to get to know each other a little bit. I know a number of friendships have been forged because of settings like this where we can come together and enjoy these great vintage machines. All right, let me get this set up. Well, here's kind of an opening shot. I'm going to get in pretty close on this. Kind of an opening shot showing our friend, who happens to be the niece of the King of Sweden. And if you don't know anything about Husqvarna or the Husqvarna sewing machine company, they have roots going all the way back to the 1600s. And that's why some people will argue they're the oldest sewing machine company in the world, with roots reaching all the way back to the 1600s, when the decree of the King of Sweden initiated a drilling and a grinding plant where they initially were making musket barrels. And then eventually around 1872, they started making the incredible sewing machines that have become world renowned because of their engineering and because of their performance. They're some of the best machines in the world. They just are. Let's see. Next picture. So one of the first things that I discover as I'm beginning to dig into this machine, and I'm going to shut off some of these lights because we're getting a lot of reflection. Hopefully that helps a little bit. So one of the first things I noticed when I started digging into Nancy's 1964 19E special is I found out that the machine, in all likelihood, to sustain damage like this, the machine in all likelihood had been dropped. And I'm not implying that it was dropped by Nancy, but at some point it took a big slam down onto the ground because this housing right here that has all the electrical contacts for the machine, it's basically the powerhouse for the machine, the power junction. While it's plastic, it's fairly heavy gauge plastic. And to have it cracked this badly indicates to me that the machine took a real big hit. And I don't know how it took a hit, but I knew something needed to be done about it because like this, it really was a fire hazard, and it was dangerous. It just was downright dangerous. And I'm guessing that if Nancy got this machine from someone else, this Miss Betsy, that maybe she probably had no clue about this, because you got to dig into the machine a little ways to find something like this. I didn't plan that, but there you go. I forgot I had posted this fun shot of these kitties in the pumpkin, and this happens to be harvest or Halloween weekend. So that's kind of a cute little shot, which has nothing to do at all with the machine. Nothing to do at all. So there's a distance shot just showing you that Nancy sent me the whole setup. She sent me the machine, the extension bed, which I have on the machine set up today, the original owner's manual, which also has all of the providential documents with it as well. I mean, she's got just a treasure of a machine here with the original. I'm just having to look at it so I can remind myself. The original tag that the machine would have had when it left the factory. It looks like this. All of their machines had little tags on them. So it's really cool when you can get a hold of these. It just adds more value and more substance to the machine. Here's the original Husqvarna guarantee. And this is a different last name. Trying to get it situated here. There's a different last name on the certificate, but maybe this is Nancy's maiden name. I have no idea. But to get one of these original certificates, one of these original service guarantees, is super duper cool. And sometimes people will ask me, did the Husqvarnas, did they come with a lifetime warranty like a lot of the FOF machines? The answer is no, they didn't. They didn't come with a lifetime warranty. They came with a guarantee but there wasn't a specified amount of time on most of the certificates as far as how long they would cover the machine. But it's really a lot of fun to get a hold of these and to be able to see them. And then along with that comes this guarantee as well, the Viking sewing machine guarantee, which usually would have been issued by the corporate headquarters in the U.S., which was based in New York City. You can see that near the bottom of the certificate there. And this was just describing, again, just some of the guarantee, the warranty, which in this instance, they're covering the machine against defects, parts, material, workmanship, blah, 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 for 25 years. And a lot of other companies copied this as well. A lot of other companies would fall in stride with offering 25-year guarantees. Sears Roebuck did that through their Kenmore division. And Singer did that. A number of other companies also followed that 25-year guarantee window. And here we have one of the kings of Sweden. I've got two kings of Sweden in the workshop right now, and he's kind of checking things out a little bit. You can kind of see him leaning in with his crown. And if you're brand new to this and you're going, what's going on with the little characters? I've got all kinds of helpers in the workshop. And they usually will jump into things while I'm working. There's some of the attachments that Nancy sent with this 19E special, along with, other doodads in that bag. I really didn't have to access any of them because it had a universal foot on it already, and that's enough to do what I need to do. And there's the niece of the King of Sweden again, kind of checking things out. I don't know that we ever came up with a definite name for her, but she is a cutie, isn't she? And there's that original upper tension that was on the machine. Upper tension units are just so critical to the operation of the machine. And as you know by now, I think, they're going to determine how well that stitch looks on the lock stitch side. So if they're not functioning properly, again, when you've got a take-up spring like this, the range of motion can also affect the performance of the machine, can result or not result in thread breaking, especially if you're working with that horrible 100% rayon stuff that I demonstrated in that other recent premiere. But you don't want to be swapping out upper tensions and assume that they're going to function the way an original one would. So I ended up replacing that for Nancy. Another shot of the machine, and you don't always see it on these Husqvarnas, but occasionally, depending on the type of lubricant that the owner or the previous owner is using on the machine, you'll get this nasty looking staining on the top of the machine where they would regularly be oiling it. And I demonstrated a little bit at the beginning of this live stream how I'm trying to reduce the prominence of those yucky stains on the top of the machine, because the machine otherwise is just drop dead gorgeous, and those are detracting from it a little bit. So I can show you a little bit more of that before we wrap up the live stream if you're dealing with the same issue of these oil slick marks on the top of the arm of the machine, because they just look nasty. They really do. There's our control center right there. And there were a couple of issues going on with Nancy's machine when it arrived at the workshop. Number one, the reverse on this machine was not working properly. It wasn't stuck in reverse, but the button right here, which controls the reverse, wasn't responding correctly. And this is even more of a complicated mechanism on these E-Series machines because they are two-stage reverse buttons. And by two-stage, I mean, as you push the button in and you kind of push in and down a little bit, you can lock it in reverse, which is something that the original machines that came, or I should say the earlier green machines that came out in the late 1940s, 1950s, they had a single stage reverse where if you wanted to sew in reverse for back tacking purposes, you had to hold that button in continuously. Later, they added two-stage reverses where you could push it in and you kind of just ease it down a little bit. It'll lock in place and then you can push it and kind of bring that button up just slightly again, and then it releases again. A lot of sewers really, really like that feature. They wanted to have a machine that would have that two-stage, so they didn't have to keep their finger on it while they were going in reverse continuously. It got to be a little bit annoying for them. I'm looking at some of the remarks here just to see if there's anything I have to. Yeah, exactly. They do help. I mean, they help encourage me. It's just kind of fun to involve them in things. But yeah, what else do we have? Just more shots of the machine here. And these aren't incredibly revealing because the issues were deep inside of the machine. There's the back of the machine again. You can see that unique cam selector in lieu of on all the other green machines, you're going to be opening that door up and you're going to have to put in one of those black cams. On this one, you never have to do that, which is really kind of cool. You can see more of those oil marks. You can see it here, here, down along here. Usually, that happens from people using something other than a machine oil. There's a lot of talk out there about using different lubricants, and some of them were originally designed for guns. Some of them were used for clocks, and you really want to stick with sewing machine oil. The way it's processed, the way the components on the inside of it intrinsically are going to be safe for the machine. And typically, they're not going to unless they have a lot of additives or coloring either. Here you can see a closer shot of that. Some more of that staining. It's kind of on the edge there. You can barely see it, but there's our little girl next to the stitch selector. And we also, again, probably because the machine at some point was dropped, the housing on the back was also cracked in several places. You'll see me doing repairs on that. And these aren't just covers. They also, they protect you and they protect the electrical fields that are inside of the motor, on the outside of the motor, and then also in that junction point that I had to do a significant repair on. So I've seen people trying to operate these machines without covers. I don't recommend that just because of safety reasons. And there you can see more of that buildup. And that's really, in all likelihood, there's an oiling point just above there. That's going to be because of excessive oiling. It just ends up sitting on the paint. And if it's not wiped off, it ends up working its way into the clear coat. And then it's just a booger to try to get that stuff off. It's just really, really tough. And also obviously cleanliness issues as well. That's the oiling point that someone probably sopped a lot of oil in there and then it ran down. And the problem with this oiling point, which is right on the back of the pillar, is that oiling point sometimes can it's basically just a plastic stem that kind of extends in, and it sometimes can leak. And right below that is that electrical junction point, and right below that is the motor. So if you go crazy on oil, especially on this point, just on the back of the pillar on these Swedish beauties, you could be putting oil right into a live electrical circuit, which could either damage the machine significantly or it could spark a fire. So the general rule is when you're oiling a machine, the different oiling points, 1 to 2 drops of oil about every 10 to 12 hours of sewing. You don't have to saturate it in oil. It's just not a good thing to do. And just more, you can see a combination of varnishing and a little bit of rust on the machine as well. And here I'm just kind of documenting the different conditions of the machine where we've got different scratch points on it and such. There's our presser foot lever. We're taking off the back panel, and unlike the other machines that you can just, it's on a spring hinge, and you can just open up the back of the machine to access the service points. And this one, you have to take out 2 bolts to take that cover off. Not a big deal, but most people probably elect not to do it just because it takes a little bit more effort. There you can see the data plate that says Type 19E. The specific model is a 19E Special, and again, the Special is because of that engineered cam stack in the back of the machine in lieu of having to put cams into the machine. And again, this has a 1 amp power source on it, a 1 amp motor. Here's a closer shot of it. And this is part of the mechanism that controls the reverse. And there were a number of issues going on with that, including this spring right here. So I had to make a number of repairs and corrections to that so that that 2-stage reverse was going to work properly again. Look at all the buildup on there. Hopefully you can see that on the webcam. It's not patina. I've gotten that from people in the past. They say, oh, that's just patina. No, it's a combination of filth, dirt, oil, sometimes rust. And any of that stuff left on the machine is going to restrict the free flow of that machine. So you got to get rid of as much of it as you can so that that machine and motor don't have to work excessively hard to turn it. You know what I mean? More junk, more buildup, a lot of deferred maintenance on this 19E Special. This is part of the electrical cord that feeds up to the light. And instead of just having a cable in there, the Swedish are very smart. So they actually put an oversized spring over it so that someone doesn't accidentally cut it. And it also just adds a little layer of protection to that electrical cable going up to the light as well. And this machine arrived already with LED lights in it. So I didn't have to change that out like I have in the past. And those LED lights are really an awesome addition. Now there's the inside back plate, and you can just get an idea of how filthy this machine was. And filth translates to taking away performance from the machine. Whether it's a localized filth or not, it's going to migrate through the entire machine. I talk about it all the time. When that motor is running, it acts like a vacuum cleaner, and it pushes all that junk through the entire machine from bobbing the balance wheel. And there's our bobbin winding assembly right there. A number of things going on with that. It also needed new belts as well. So I ended up replacing the long belt that goes over the balance wheel and connects on the inside of that assembly, and then also replacing the short belt as well. When it comes to a machine performance, it really all kind of starts down here. If you have anything between the motor and the needle that is going to hold that machine back, it's going to have a direct impact on the performance of that machine. And that's why my process on a Swedish Beauty is now almost 130 steps, because there's so many points of this machine that have to be addressed to get it to that optimal level. Also, if you look real close, this side panel right here that covers this bobbin winding assembly and joins with this rear panel, it's been damaged pretty badly. And again, I believe that in all likelihood, that probably happened in conjunction when this machine took a tumble because of that other damage that I'll show you as well. Oh, hey, Dr. T. Welcome from the great country of Finland, my friend. And there you can see that cracking right there. And that certainly does happen sometimes without the machine being dropped because it's plastic. But with all the other damage that I found in the machine, this may well have happened when that machine was dropped as well. And again, if you look real close, you can just see the machine is incredibly filthy. Also, the reason I changed out this short belt, and I don't do it arbitrarily because these belts are really expensive. But this one had cracking already starting on it. And that's the telltale sign that machine has reached the end of its expiration, that belt needs to be replaced. Let's see. You wrote a question. I think it's a question. Old varnish buildup. Exactly right, Emma. Um, and Dr. T writes, thou, I think he means the 1 amp with 11 ohms. I think that's supposed to say ohms, or 110 volts is not the same as the 230 volt European system. Well, the motors are going to vary when you're talking about European motors on Husqvarnas versus US motors on Husqvarna. The output of those motors in those two different settings. Good morning, Eddie. Good morning. Welcome, Eddie. The output of those motors in those two settings is going to be commensurate. It's going to be equal. But the difference in the engineering of those two motors is when you go to a European motor with higher voltage, you're going to be reducing the volts of that motor. The volts of that motor in a European system will be less than a US motor, but the voltage makes up for that. So European motors where let's say this motor on Nancy's in the US is rated at 1 amp, it's going to be rated at lesser than 1 amp in a European system, but it's going to make it up. It's going to make that power up by having 2 times the voltage. It's just like when you look at some of the featherweight motors out of Europe, they typically, the featherweight motors are going to be rated on the European side at 0.25 amps, 0.25 amps, where the US featherweight motors are rated at 0.4 amps. But again, the motor output will be virtually identical, because on the European side, even though the amperage of the motor is considerably less, almost 50% less, the voltage is 50% higher, being around 220, 230 in most of the parts of Europe. So that's the trade-off. The only trade-off is the voltage versus the amperage. But the motor output, what it finally gives you down at the needle, if you're using a Husqvarna with a European version motor on it like this, that in the US would be 1 amps, those machines are going to perform, if they're equally prepared, they're going to be performing identically. Even though one, if you look at it, you're going, holy mackerel, this one only has a 0.5 or a 0.6 amp motor. Yeah, but you're running it at 230 volts. So that's the difference. One will be rated higher as far as amperage, but have less voltage. The other one will be much higher in receiving the voltage, but the amperage will be toned down on that motor so that they'll be performing at the same level. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. And here you can see where someone had tried to do this is the side cover that goes over the bobbin winding assembly. Someone had tried to do a repair. And again, it's kind of like when people are lubricating their sewing machines, people are all over the board. And part of it is because there is some misinformation out there about trying other things on sewing machines as far as lubricating them. And I won't get into tri-flow and all that other stuff that's out there, but they'll also use different types of glues and epoxies and stuff like that to do repairs on this. And the belief that more is better is usually the philosophy that a lot of people use. So, the reason they came out with super glues is because they're super strong and you don't need a super amount of them to do the job. So if you happen to be repairing your covers on your Husqvarna, just clean those inside edges that you're going to be joining together. A good way to clean them is a clean brush. It could be a clean toothbrush that you're only going to dedicate towards using on your sewing machine. And then you clean those grooves out that these two pieces are going to be joining together. One of the best solutions to use, and it's so easy to get and it's so cheap, is good old-fashioned rubbing alcohol. You just want to make sure that you're not overspraying it or getting it onto the patina, because rubbing alcohol will destroy the patina on a machine, even if it's on a side plastic cover. So just clean all of those joining points out using a brush and a light amount of rubbing alcohol. Let it dry. It tends to dry very quickly. And then apply your adhesive just on the inside points to join those pieces together. And then you can rubber band it to hold them tightly together, or something that's not going to be incredibly aggressive. You wouldn't want to clamp a plastic housing, because you could crack it even further. Maybe a couple of rubber bands to hold those two pieces together. But all of this is just overkill. You don't need this much adhesive when you're trying to repair a plastic cover on a Husqvarna. You just don't. Again, just filth and dirt. Part of this is a combination of excessive oiling, but also can be a result of the carbon coming off of the brushes and getting into the environment of that space, and can also be the result of belts that are starting to degrade. Belts that are starting to degrade will start to push airborne different, small particles of the belt as it starts to come off of the belt. So you'll see this kind of stuff too is getting into there. The only problem with that is if you continue to push those belts, it's going to end up eventually getting sucked into that motor and then sticking, with all of those different copper contacts being electrified. It's going to stick all this junk on the inside of your motor as well. And I saw quite a bit of that on this machine. Again, I'm just showing you here more of that inside panel and just the filth and the buildup on the machine. Look at all this down here. And this is the greatest evidence of what happens when you go crazy with oil. The pan on the bottom of there is on there for a specific reason, to catch, a few drips of oil. But when you get to this extent, I mean, it basically looks like a greasy mud field, and that's exactly what it is. And I always take the base off of the machine, so I'm able to get at all of that, as you'll see in the shots. Again, you just see the filth and buildup there on the machine. Also showing you the condition of the belt here as well. Belts are so essential to the drivetrain of the machine. The proper belt, that you're doing regular maintenance on the belt and the belts in this case, and also the pulley systems as well. Again, even if you're not an excessive oiler, there's going to be oil that moves through the environment of that machine. It'll eventually stick to surfaces like this, and then you'll have launch issues. So again, regular cleanup of the belts and the pulleys is also important. I would say at least 2 to 3 times a year, depending on how much sewing you're doing. There's one of those cracks that they tried to repair. You're kind of seeing it from the other side. And this is what leads me to believe this is normally a real nice, almost a white beige color. Look at the color of that. And all the excess from here, where this was probably just flooded with oil. And then as this pulley is turning and the motor is running, it's just spraying that stuff all over the place. You can see it here. And these are so discolored because probably of an improper lubricant that was used on this machine that made its way through the entire machine. I had to do a lot of deep cleaning on Nancy's machine to get it right. And then we're back to the beginning. So I'm going to jump back to the other workbench, and we're actually going to check it out. When we get back to here, we'll check out some more of these progress shots. I really want you to see this so you can understand where this machine started, and then we can celebrate where it is now. All right, let's get some lights back on and put this Swedish beauty to work a little bit. All right. I think I have all my cables set up properly now. So a quick little overview of this machine, just so you kind of understand the basics of how it operates, etc. Let's bring this other light in too. So the layout of this machine is actually really quite simple. I think it is anyway. If we start right on the bottom, again, you're going to see that beautiful badge mark, Sweden Special. And again, because this machine was built with that cam stack in the back, no cams have to be put into this machine. Here's our feed dog drop right here. You rotate it clockwise to about the 6 o'clock position. The feed dogs drop, you rotate it back, and those feed dogs are fully engaged. Why would you even do that? Well, you can do it for one of two reasons. One is if you're dealing with a real thick stack of material you're trying to fit underneath the presser foot, by temporarily dropping the feed dogs, you gain about 2 to 3 millimeters of clearance. And then as soon as you get that material underneath the presser foot and lower that presser foot, you can rotate this back counterclockwise, so those feed dogs then will press into that material so you're ready to sew. And also for free motion quilting, obviously, you can drop them as well. Here we've got our stitch width, and you can see right now we're set on 0, so we'll be straight stitching. And then if you go anywhere between 1 and 4, you're going to be generating either a zigzag, or depending on where your setting is on the back of the machine, you're going to be generating one of those cam generated stitches. And also there's a tiny little metal tab on the top of here that they designed as a stopping and starting point when you're doing buttonholes. Here's our stitch length and also our 2-stage reverse. And when we do most of our cam generated stitches today, we're not going to be all the way up on 4. We're going to go all the way down to between 1 and 0.5, right about in this range right there. And the same thing is true of the other green machines. When you're sewing the decorative or the ornamental stitches on the other green machines, whether it's a 21A, a 21E, Type 21, any of the other green machines, when you do your decorative ornamental stitching, I just had a conversation with a customer about this recently. They were struggling with the output of the stitches and the presentation of the stitches. And I said, well, where do you have your stitch length set on your green machine, on your Swedish Beauty? And they had it set all the way up to about there on 3. And I said, try doing the same thing, but take it all the way down to right about 0.75. And that individual just started giggling like a little chipmunk, saying, "It looks beautiful now. It looks perfect." Well, that's the key again of how essential, depending on what you're trying to get as far as the stitch output, setting that stitch length and that stitch width properly if you've got the discretion to do it. And you can change the look completely of what that stitch is that you generate. So needle position right here, just simple and straightforward. Where on the other green machines, you would have needle position as well, but you also would have that slider on there to choose the different stitches on the cam output. This one, you don't have to do that because that's done on the rear of the machine, as you'll see. And that's about it. I mean, it's just a very simple machine to operate. That's why people love it. And it really is a wonderful step up from the original rotary machines that Husqvarna first made that were straight stitch only. So, all right, blah 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 blah. Let's check this out. And if you weren't here right at the beginning, I showed you that I did do some off-camera stitch offs, and I'm using the tri-lobal embroidery thread today by Coates and Clark, and we're using a size 90-14 universal Schmetz needle. And once I get done with all of the servicing to the machine, I usually will do something like this off camera. So the needle we're using has already gotten a little bit of workout on this saddle grade leather. And this is about 3 to 4 ounces of leather that we're doing the stitching on. We'll be doing a lot heavier stitch offs than that today. But I'll show you originally after I get done dropping things. Hold on a second. I am just really testing gravity today. Initially, with that other upper tension in the machine, I was having some issues. Is that the original one? I think that is. Really having some issues with getting that lock stitch to define. It's probably a little bit hard to see in the shot, but that's what prompted me to say this is not going to work. We got to go. You can see it on that top row especially. And as soon as I put that original Husqvarna upper tension unit in and made adjustments on it, the stitching was just off the charts. That's some of the stuff I did right after replacing that upper tension. And obviously a lot of other adjustments and cleaning as well. But again, don't swap upper tensions in sewing machines. That's definitely something you want to stick with the original on. Yeah, there's some of the other stitching as well that I was doing initially on this saddle grade leather. And I was having a lot of balance issues once I put that new upper tension in. And that's the thing, when you put a new upper tension in, or if you disassemble an upper tension, you're going to have to make a lot of adjustments to get that balance back again, because it's not going to be plug and play. You're going to have to make those fine tuning adjustments. There's another one I did after that tension was in and was set up nicely. Oh, wrong way. Yeah, she's a happy girl now. She's a happy girl. All right. So what should we sew first? What should we sew first? Why don't we do some elk hide? We haven't done that in a while. Let's do some elk hide. And again, what I'm going to be laying down is just a regular straight stitch. I'm seeing a little bit of a reflection of that light. All right, let's see if this light will work. I might have to shut this one off. Still getting that wave going across. They're starting to go away a little bit. All right, here we go. A single layer of elk hide. I'm going to leave the LED light of the machine off. I think that may help. We'll leave it off for a little bit and see what we think. All right, so take up arm at the highest position. And let's launch into this elk hide. Again, about 3 to 4 ounces. Elk hide is chemically processed, so it's going to, it's gonna galvanize that surface and make it more difficult for us to get through. I don't think this 19E special will have any trouble at all. Here we go. I wonder if I could get a clearer shot too if I were to take this extension bed off. How is the lighting right now on the sewing area down here? Can you see it clearly enough, or should I take that extension bed off and lower the camera down a little bit more? Let me know what your thoughts are on that. I think I might try that. Now let's see how that shot is. I think that'll be a little bit better for us. Yeah, that's a lot better. So let's take a look at the stitching now that we finally have that set up. That's the straight stitch that we just laid down. Lock stitch. Again, look at that from the side. And there's our lock stitch right there. I like this Alkite too because it doesn't have a crazy nap on it. It makes it a little bit easier to see things. But I would definitely say that that first sew off on this Alkite is a page 34. And again, we're not using a leather needle. We're using a universal needle by Schmetz, size 9014. So I'm going to throw that to the back as a pass, and we're going to launch into our next sew off. As a matter of fact, I'd be curious, maybe what we can do for fun is we can try to double the thickness, see if this 19E special can manage this as well. That's the thickness that we're looking at sewing right now. The thickness that would be more than a man's belt. Probably looking at about 12 to 14 ounces of leather there. And we'll see how it does in managing a sew off like that. I did not try this off camera. And I'm going to set these up back to back so we can see that lock stitch a little bit better. See how that upper tension unit is going to manage this. And I'm not going to change the presser foot pressure, which means the length of the stitch might be a little bit condensed because we're feeding 2 layers now instead of just 1. So let's see what happens. And I might give it a little bit more gusto going through this. Matter of fact, what I could do for fun is I could sew this with a slow gear so that I can keep it on track and follow the stitch line of that other one. Let's try that. All right. Take up arms at the highest position. All right, let's give this a try. We're attempting now 2 layers of genuine elk hide. So let's see what we think. Here we go. Again, when you use the slow gear, it does not increase the power of the machine. It does not. It's simply going to gear the machine down so you're taking it from full speed down to 1/5 speed. So the row we just did is on top, closest to me, right here. The row on the bottom, further to the back of the workbench, is the first row that we did. Folks, that is some beautiful, beautiful stitching. Let's see how we did on the lock stitch. Again, this is what we just sewed through. Right around 14 ounces of genuine elk hide. Not an easy sew off at all. Not an easy sew off. All right, so this is our lock stitch, which I'm pleased with it overall, but I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that we could have bumped up the upper tension just slightly to define those stitches a little bit more. They look a little bit loose, and that's a product of insufficient upper tension. But all in all, it's a very good looking lock stitch, especially if you consider we're using embroidery thread that is not designed for leather sewing, and we're using a size 9014 universal needle. We're not using a leather needle. That would have a different scarf and a different point with a better cutting edge to it. So I'm really pleased with the outcome of that. And again, that's what we just sewed through with this 19E. So I'm going to throw that to the back as a pass as well. That's kind of our power pass. I don't know how we could challenge this machine more than 2 layers of genuine elk hide. Genuine elk hide is tough stuff to sew. And when you get up to this level, it's really going to demonstrate how well that machine is operating, how strong it is, how capable it is. So when this gets back out to Nancy, if she wants to do make leashes and all kinds of other stuff, she's going to be able to do that with no trouble at all. What should we sew next? I've got some of this protected full grain leather, and I've kind of cut it so that we can either go around in a circle with it. Just kind of looking at my other sew offs that I have set up here. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. We'll kind of go around in a circle and show the controllability of this machine, being able to manage that power. And again, protected full grain leather is going to have a special coating on it to protect it against staining, which is also going to galvanize the surface. So even though we're going with a single layer of this stuff, about 3 ounces of leather, it's not an easy sew off. But I know this 19E special with a 1 amp motor is going to make it look simple dimple. So, all right, there we go. I think that's set up pretty good. And we will sew this at regular speed. I'll just try to manage it. We're not going to be using the slow gear on this one. So here we go. I waited to make that turn too long. Dag nabbit. Protected full grain leather is a little bit slippery, so you have to initiate those turns earlier. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. And I've done a couple of late turns with this stuff. Get that thread back so I don't sew over it. And again, if you're doing a lot of sewing like this and you're trying to regulate that speed with a foot controller, especially with these Husqvarna foot controllers that have resistors and capacitors in them, you might want to use that slow gear in that instance, because it'll eventually cause the electricity to build up in the foot controller. I mentioned a net down in Florida, and it will cause that foot controller to overheat and it'll kill it. So if we're going to be doing a ton of this, I wouldn't be regulating it with a foot controller. I would move into that slow gear and control the speed that way. Again, the slow gear is going to reduce the machine down to 1/5 of the original speed so that you can have better control as you're trying to navigate turns like I'm doing right now. And I think that's far enough. You know what? I feel like a little kid when I do that. I really do. I feel like a little kid when you can sew around in circles like that. And I know some of you, when you were way back in the day in home economics classes, some of you told me, I think Susie from Minnesota mentioned that they did something like this, but they didn't thread the machine up. They just did it on paper or something like that so that the teacher could see that the student knew how to control that machine and and manage that speed and manage that power. But here we're using embroidery thread on protected full grain leather. It's a little bit nuts, but the final result is a beautiful, I mean, it almost looks like art. And all we did was sew in a circle, nothing fancy, nothing, extraordinary at all. But it's just fun to create something like that. More importantly, it's fun to demonstrate how well the machine is sewing now and how we're able to navigate material like this through some fairly tight turns on leather and do it successfully. So there you go. There you go. Nothing fancy, just a little bit of fun. And obviously, I don't do a back tack. I don't lock off the stitches, so there could be a little bit of unraveling on the ends. But that just gives you an idea of how well Nancy's machine is stitching now. That's our top stitch. We turn it over. This is our lock stitch. And I do like this protected full grain leather, like the veg tan leather as well, because it has that real flat nap, and we can see those stitches on the back present very well in the lock stitch. Yeah, and I'll send this along with the machine when I ship it back to Medina, Ohio, to Nancy, so she can also kind of check it out. Customers like to do that. They'll watch a live stream like this or a premiere, and then they'll get their machine back in their home, and they can actually look at those sew-offs that were done during that live stream or premiere. That's why I do it. Other people will post still shots, but that's not the proof in the pudding. The proof in the pudding is seeing that machine arrive limping and then seeing it dancing at the premiere or live stream. That's the fun stuff. That's the cool stuff. All right, let me throw this to the back. And I didn't say, but these are obviously page 34 stitching, both the top stitch and the latch as well. So isn't this a great machine? 19Es are they're not easy to find. They're fairly rare. And when you get to see one dance like this at a live stream, it's just a lot of fun. I think it's fun. Of course, I have fun doing lots of stuff, pretty much anything. I'm just looking at the comments real quick to see if I need to respond to anything. Well, I am blessed to have two of my leadership team members here, Sonny and also Emma as well. I don't know if I didn't look at the chat, scroll up. I don't know if Paula is here or Bill is here, but if you have any questions, if you need any follow-up, just reach out to one of those two ladies that are present right now, or if Paula's here, one of those three ladies, or Bill, and they'll be able to help you out. Again, I'm going to concentrate on trying to move us forward. We have so much ground to cover with this 19E special, and I want to keep us moving forward, tracking forward. So this is obviously, for many people, they're celebrating Halloween this weekend. They're celebrating, on the other side, they're celebrating, it's called Harvest Fest, because that's originally, when you go back, way back to the roots of the holiday, it was called Harvest Fest because this is the time of the year where the farmers would be bringing stuff in from the fields, blah, 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 and all that. So I decided to try to be a little bit more creative, and I came up with this cute little pumpkin. And what I'm going to try to do using the slow gear is I'm going to try to stitch around the eyes, stitch around the nose, stitch around the mouth, and see how well I do with that. Because it's kind of flimsy, it might be a little bit tricky. See how that's kind of wiggly jiggly? But I'll give it a go. And I'll probably use a real tight zigzag to do that with, probably. Just gonna see where it's set on the back of the machine right now. Good thing I looked, because right now, if you look at the back of the machine, my cord's caught. If you look at the back of the machine right now, the cam selector with a little dot is on blind hem stitch. So I'm going to turn it. This is going to be our zigzag that we're set on right now. And then our other option is a 3-point zigzag right there. Take it back up to 4, and then we'll be able to move the knob. If you don't do that, the knob is going to be loosey-goosey, and you're going to think that something broke on the machine, but it didn't. So to show you what I mean, let's say we already sewed that, then to actually use the stitch, we're going to turn this to 4 right there. And then once I go to turn that knob on the back, I'll take this down to 0, make my change on the back, and then take this back up to 4 again. Stitch around this pumpkin a little bit for fun. And I'm going to engage that slow gear, which takes a little bit of the turnability away, but it'll slow that needle down, so I'll be able to manage the speed a little bit better, hopefully. All right, here we go. Let's see what we get. What I'm getting is all over the place. I'm not going to do all of this because it'll drive you guys nuts because I'm not doing so well. It's still too wide. We'll do the other eye on a more narrow setting. I've got it set too wide right now. All right, that's not horribly impressive. I did a better job of cutting it out than stitching around there. And part of that is I need to obviously make that a lot more narrow than it is. All right. Yeah, that's way too wide. I gave it a try. All right, so let's take the stitch width down now quite a ways, because that was of course they don't always make pumpkins exact, do they? They kind of have them distorted a little bit to make them more goofy looking. Well, I definitely accomplished that. All right, let's try this again. All right, here we go. You see the benefit of that slow gear where I'm able to, this is kind of a flimsy veg tan leather that I'm using, but I'm able to kind of maneuver it and steer it a little bit better than I would be able to otherwise because of that speed reduction. And this time, because I did a better job of reducing the width of that stitch, we came a little bit closer, not really great, but we came a little bit closer to navigating around the eyes of this pumpkin. Yeah, nothing brag worthy. The stitching is good, but the operator is doing average at best. All right. Widen that a little bit more. I think I went maybe a little bit too narrow. All right, let's try this again. We'll go around the nose and then I'm going to quit there because you guys are going to fall asleep watching this. See how that leather is kind of flexing there? So it's making it really difficult to try to steer that. What I might have to do is rotate that needle down, press your foot up, and we'll kind of pivot a little bit so I can cheat a little bit to get around there. All right, let's stop there. Oh goodness, that's tougher to do that than it looks. It's not horrible. And the stitching looks really, really good. All right. So I'm going to stop there. I did a weak attempt to do the eyes and the nose. Yeah, nothing brag worthy. Nothing brag worthy. Now what I'll do is I'll just kind of go around the edge with it. And I'll do it at regular speed so you can see how essential that slow gear is. And let me see, we're on the 3-point zigzag right now. Yep, we're on the 3-point zigzag. So I'm going to shorten that up even more. Around 3. Okay. So what I've done is I've set the stitch width on 3. Set the stitch width on 3. And I've come up just a little bit on the stitch length to, well, I've come down a little bit actually, about 1.25 is where we are on stitch length right now. So all we're going to do now is try to follow it around the edge. We'll try to follow this around the edge, trying to sew around these eyes in that, especially with a standard presser foot. It's a little bit awkward, but you know what? We did it anyway, didn't we? That's okay. Because we're here to celebrate the machine, not my navigation ability. At least I don't think so. All right, here we go. So regular speed now, not the slow gear. That's a real narrow path right there. And you can see all the needle movement with that 3-point zigzag. It's really tricky to keep it on course. But this machine is doing a much better job than I am. That was the toughest part right there. Well, maybe not. When we do this stem, it's going to be real tricky. That is a crazy turn that we're about to try to do. And I'm not going to try to do it. I'm going to put that needle down and we'll rotate it a little bit into that turn. And through this turn right here, I think I am going to kick on that slow gear because this is going to be a booger to try to flex this leather and to get through this turn even at a slow speed. It's going to be a challenge. Here we go. Nope, I went off course. Dag nabbit. All right, we got to turn it again because the leather is just bending so much. There we go. I should have skipped the stem. That is really a tough thing to navigate through that area there. You can hear the result of that slow gear, the way the machine sounds right now. All right, I'm going to stop there. That is some beautiful stitching. Not the straightest of stitching, but that's me. That's not the machine. So you can see my weak attempt to decorate this pumpkin. And that 3-point stitch, in my opinion, is a real pretty stitch. We'll kind of take a look at it here. Yeah, I did pretty good at going around the edges, but that stem was really a tricky thing to try to navigate. But you know, it's something different that we normally don't do, that I normally don't do. So there you go. Happy Halloween, happy harvest with my whatever this is. This little pumpkin guy. So I'll send it with the machine when it goes back to Nancy, and she can use it as a, I don't know what she'll use it as. Maybe put her cup of coffee on it or something. Oh man, I'll throw that to the back. Oh, I didn't show you the lock stitch. I'm sorry. Kind of hard to see the lock stitch on there, but at any rate, it is what it is, right? Somehow I managed to unthread that. Just I pulled the thread the wrong way or something. Well, that's okay. Everything happens for a reason. So when you're threading this machine, obviously you're going to thread it from front to back. The flat side of the needle is going to go to the back as well. And when you're putting the bobbin into the bobbin case, setting the machine up to sew, you're going to be setting it up so that it's going to be turning clockwise. Come on. There we go. Live streaming is fun unless you're on the other end here and you're nervous because everything that can possibly go wrong will probably go wrong. So, well, thank you, Sonny. I don't know if I would say it's even qualifying as shabby, but it was fun to do anyway. All right, now let's go back to power again on this machine. What I have here is saddle grade leather. And saddle grade leather is exactly what it sounds like. It's used for saddles, it's used for gun holsters, it's used for any of those applications where durability is going to be a major deal. So we're going to try going through a total of 3 layers of this stuff, which is probably around 14 or 15 ounces of leather. We've already done 2 layers of elk hide, so this shouldn't be ridiculously difficult, hopefully. All right, I got to change my machine back now so it's doing a straight stitch. So I'm taking my stitch width down to 0. I'm going to increase my stitch length. And we won't go to 4, we'll probably go to 3.5. All right, here we go. And I'll do this at full speed. All right, here we go. Come on. Get your foot on the foot control, my friend. Get your foot on the foot control. And that's through 3 layers of saddle grade that we just did. Saddle grade leather. That is a tough sew off. And other than me not doing a good job of launching, the machine did a fabulous job in managing that. We'll take a look at the lock stitch as soon as I clip these threads. So this again is our top stitch, which is absolutely spot on. And our lock stitch. Look at that, what we just went through right there. Give you an idea. Those are gorgeous stitches, folks. They really are. Beautiful stitches. From start to finish, the spacing, the formation, the integrity of the stitch. Again, going through 3 layers of saddle grade leather. Gorgeous, gorgeous stitching. So what I think I'll do next to it for fun is I'll put down a 3-point zigzag. A lot of needle swing. Again, a non-leather needle going through 3 layers of saddle grade leather. And we're going to see how the machine can manage that. And I'll hopefully do a better job of launching this time as well. Okay, so let's set it up for that. We're already set on the back with the 3-point zigzag, if I remember correctly. Yep, 3-point zigzag. That's a regular zigzag right there, and then the blind hem stitch. So we're set on 3-point zigzag. And now we've got to make the fine adjustments on the machine. So we're going to be taking this from 0 over to 4. And then we're going to be taking our stitch length down quite a ways. Right around probably 1. So we're set on 1 here, set on 4 here, and we've already set it on the back of the machine. All right, so it's a little bit insane what we're going to try here. We're doing a 3-point zigzag, a huge amount of needle swing, and we're doing it with a non-leather needle that's already gotten quite a bit of work, and we're doing it through 3 layers of saddle grade leather. But you know what? If it's not difficult, then everybody would do it, and they're not. So let's give it a try, see what we think. I did a lot better launching that time, a lot better. And the machine did fabulous with a very difficult stitch off. Again, we're talking about saddle grade leather, 3 layers of this stuff, and we're doing it with a non-leather needle and with embroidery thread. Did I mention that? Embroidery thread. Three layers of saddle grade leather, folks. That is incredibly difficult. And when you go to a stitch like this, that's a 3-point zigzag, this machine is doing a phenomenal job of managing some very difficult circumstances. And again, using a non-leather needle with embroidery thread. How cool is that? Let's turn it over and look at the lock stitch. Beautiful stitching. Wow. Wow. So are we going to see anything dramatic? This is our lock stitch that we're looking at now. Anything dramatic, or is it going to be absolutely as it should be? That is beautiful looking stitching, y'all. That is beautiful looking stitching. Again, it's not a garment leather. We're talking about saddle grade leather and 3 layers of it. And this is the lock stitch. Always more difficult for a machine to complete because of the factor of pulling that thread back up through those thick layers of saddle grade leather. Well, if you're not impressed, I am, because I know how difficult this is, going through that kind of leather and generating stitching like that and like that. So that's going to the back as a definite pass as well. That is definitely a pass. So with that, let's do a little bebop back over to Facebook again. I want to show you some more progress shots. This machine arrived very troubled, very sick, and now it's doing just a phenomenal job. It's performing way above what anyone would have expected based on where it started. Okay, let's go to the next set of photos. I really want you to see this so you can appreciate where things started and where they are now. I'll get some of those extra lights off that are causing glare right now. So you kind of get an idea looking at this picture what the condition of this machine was when it started. And truthfully, it's almost hard to see the level of filth that was built up in this. This is all excess oil and just junk all over the machine. And it was inside of the motor, as you'll see. It was everywhere it's not supposed to be. And here I've separated the machine from the base. I've taken the motor out as well because we've got to get to the bottom of this area down here and deal with all of this and all of the stuff. Everything you see here is also on the inside of the motor as well, as you'll see when I clean it and flush it and optimize it. It was just, oh my gosh, the motor was running so hot and it was running so labored. It's just amazing it didn't burn out. And that just points to the engineering quality of these motors. It took a lot of punishment and still kept on going. Now, one of the essential pivots on the machine that controls that reverse function is what I'm heating with the torch right here. Again, if you decide to pick up a torch, just realize that there's something you have to handle very, very carefully. They run at about 1,000 to 1,200 degrees. And while the flame is targeted, the heat factor of it extends much further than the point of the flame. So you can damage paint surfaces. You can melt plastic if you're near plastic. Just be aware it's something you want to handle very carefully if you decide to try to do it. I forgot I threw this in here. What I've started doing, because I know that a lot of people find the progress shots fascinating. They love to look inside of the machine like I do, and they like to, go into that machine surgically with me and see kind of what I'm doing. But to make it a little bit more fun, what I've started doing more of is inserting random pictures that are just fun among those progress shots. So people will be clicking through and all of a sudden they'll come across something like this, where apparently this little kitty is reminding this big dog that the kitty is actually in charge. So and here I'm starting to dig into the back of the machine. I'm making some adjustments on it. I'm starting to address the reverse issue and just doing my thing. There's the bobbin winding assembly. I've shown this to you multiple times. If you take a close look at my fingers, it'll give you an idea of how filthy this mechanism was when I started. And it had just incredible buildup on it. And this one mechanism does so many things for the machine. It auto disengages the clutch, so you can just slide a bobbin on there and wind a bobbin without releasing a stop action or anything like that. It's going to manage that slow gear. It's going to take the transfer off of the motor and then push it through the belts to the main shaft. And it has so many functions, and it can't do its job when it's like this. It just can't. There we're kind of looking into the side of the machine. That mechanism is out of the way. We can see all the filth. We can see the buildup. We can see the condition of the environment of the machine, which is just horrific right now. And also you can get a glimpse of that long belt that was on the machine originally, which is so glazed. It's amazing it made any traction at all when that machine was trying to launch. It's probably part of the problem that Nancy was experiencing with this machine when she was trying to do that work for the veterinary relief organization that she's a part of. And I'm just looking at the remarks here real quick. Dr. T makes a remark here, and I kind of know what he's saying. He says, Scott does wonderful work, but these machines are not made for industrial use. Industrial is oftentimes intermingled with commercial. There's different levels of sewing, and it usually starts at household, and then it goes to light industrial, then it goes to industrial, then it goes to commercial. Now, a machine that was designed originally as a household machine back in the day was built at a totally different level than machines are today. The components of forged steel, the engineering of the machine, the powerhouse of the machine, and everything about that machine allows it to operate way outside of the scope of what most people would consider to be household sewing level. Household sewing level was the light knits, occasional denim, silks, satins, cottons, and the like. And that's how a lot of these machines were used when they came out in the 1940s and 50s, like this green machine we're looking at right now. Those standards of what this machine can do, in my opinion, and as I've demonstrated, not just opinion, but I've shown you multiple times, these machines can sew at a light industrial level, even though they were not originally marketed that way, because of the quality of the engineering, because of the strength. And once the machine is optimized, it's, they never conceived, back when these machines were rolled out, they never conceived of a machine like this being able to sew 14 to 16 ounces of saddle grade leather, not just once, not as a one-off, but again and again and again and again and again and again, without the machine being adversely affected. Now, if you try sewing at that level, at a light industrial level, with the contemporary machines that are being marketed now, good luck. Good luck trying to do that. But when you're talking about a machine like a Husqvarna that was built as a household sewing machine, but was built like a light industrial machine back in the day. So that's where I would challenge anyone to say that a machine that is capable of sewing at the level that I've demonstrated numerous times on this channel, again and again and again and again, and the machine does it with ease, it does it without being compromised in any way, that machine is not able to handle a light industrial range. Again, when you get into commercial range, you're talking about major speed differences where machines are sewing at 3,000 to 4,000 stitches per minute, and they're sewing through layers that are insane. Whether it's nylon webbing or whatever materials they might be stitching. So I understand what Dr. T is saying, but I would definitely be able to argue and support the argument that these Swedish engineered machines can definitely handle a range of light industrial, not once, but over and over again, as long as they're maintained properly. Well, yeah, I mean, and when you're talking about, Dr. T is mentioning 6 millimeters, when you're talking about measuring leather thickness, they usually will do it in ounces. At least in the US they do. I'm not sure about Finland. But when you're talking about sewing through the equivalent of a very thick man's belt, like I did on that genuine elk hide, you're talking about 14 to 16 ounces of leather. And you're talking about a thickness of about, as Dr. T had alluded to, about 6 or 7 millimeters of thickness. That's the equivalent of stacking about 3 to 4 quarters, US quarters, 3 to 4 US quarters on top of each other. That is off the charts crazy as far as what a properly restored and optimized Swedish Beauty can handle. And again, when that motor and everything from the motor all the way down to the needle is optimized, other than me not getting good foot position on the foot controller sometimes, these machines can do it with such a level of ease. So easy. It's just absolutely insane. And they can do it again and again and again. Will you eventually have to, as I've done for Nancy, will you eventually have to replace these belts? Yeah, you will. Will you have to replace the motor brushes? Absolutely. Do you have to do an adequate, general maintenance on the machine? I would say if you're sewing real hardcore, twice a year. If you're an occasional sewer, servicing the machine once a year is just a good practice to get into. And doing general maintenance on the machine will ensure that you can maintain that level of performance that you'll see during this live stream today. You're not going to get too impressed with my sewing technique, honestly, but I am, even with that silly little pumpkin that I cut out, when you're dealing with a leather that is a single layer and it flexes and it moves and you're trying to maneuver around those tight turns, I didn't do too shabby of a job, as Sonny said. But we're not here to critique necessarily my sewing technique. We're here to see how does a machine go from the way it arrived at the workshop where it was limping and disabled to a point now where it's just soaring through everything from 16 ounces of leather. And even when we get into some of the cotton sew-offs that we'll do shortly, and you'll have a chance to pick out the color of cotton like we did the last time, even managing the lightest of sew-offs as well with minimal changes to the machine. So that's what we're here to celebrate today, is the marvel of taking a machine that was just dead in the water, was struggling, was limping, and now it's just dancing through each sew-off that we give it and laying down page 34 stitching. That's worth celebrating, in my opinion. That's worth getting excited about. That's worth getting, getting together to witness. And that's why I love doing these live streams, even more so than the pre-recorded ones where we can still interact in the live chat, because you guys can witness this in real time and can see it happening. Unlike, other folks that'll show a machine with stitch offs and still pictures, and you can't hear the machine running, you can't witness it. That's just selling the machine way short and is less likely to inspire someone to take a step towards vintage when they can compare it to what they're getting from their contemporary machine. It's exciting, isn't it? It's just exciting. Okay, what do we have now? Yeah, we're kind of looking at the side of the machine, blah, blah, blah. And we're looking at all the filth and the buildup. Does that help or hurt? That kind of hurts. Yeah, we'll leave that off. Just a close-up again of, showing you, if you go into a general service center, and does that help? I think that helps a little bit. You go into a general service center and you go in with your machine this filthy and it's really choking the life out of the machine. Guess what? When you go to pick up that machine, all this stuff is still going to be there, because they're going to take about 30 to 45 minutes on your machine, do general oiling. That's about it. I mean, honestly. And then they're going to write you a bill for about $150. And here we're seeing that incredible mechanism that the Swedish came up with. Again, it gives you auto clutch disengagement. It gives you slow gear. It gives you the transfer junction coming off of the motor, so you can maximize whether it's a 1 amp or a 1.5 amp motor. If this is working at the top of its game, then you're not going to lose very much at all going from that output pulley coming off of the motor into this junction and then eventually up to that main shaft heading down to the needle. If this is not optimized, then you're going to lose a huge amount of that motor power before it ever can work its way down to the needle. And that's why I get contacted all the time from people that will say, I watched your video on YouTube. I saw what that 19E special was able to do. I've got the same make and model, and mine can't even come close to sewing that much leather or sewing at that level of stitch quality. Every part of the machine is important, especially this piece right here. And it was really struggling when it came to the workshop. Now there we're looking at the bottom of the machine. And this is, you know, there's a couple little access points that they give you. This gets you to the bottom of the pitman arm. This gets you to the general area of the reverse. This gets you to the bottom part of the motor so you can change out the motor brush. But unless you remove this entire bottom, you're not able to get to a lot of the critical points that need servicing and need to be optimized. And, it's a little bit tricky because you got to disconnect some electrical wires and you've got to take the bobbin winding assembly and out and that, but it's really worth it. It's really worth it. And it makes a huge difference in ultimately how well that machine is going to run. Does that help? I don't know if that helps or not. Yeah, I think that does help a little bit. So here's a side panel. This goes on, actually, this is the back panel that goes over the motor. And I'm just doing different things. There you can see it's all busted up. And you can see again all that filth that's built up in there. This also is cracked. It's one of the essential parts that points down that holds it anchored on the bottom to the bottom of the machine. That's better. Yeah, that's a combination of belt wear. Yeah, it's a combination of belt wear and just the degrading of the belt as well, Emma. You're exactly right. I'm trying to get the right angle with this silly thing. I'm seeing a little bit of a glare, but maybe it's clear to you on your end. There we go. That's better. Yeah, I mean, Dr. T's talking about putting a 7,000 RPM, probably like a servo motor on a 201K. I don't know that I would recommend that unless you're going to be lubricating that thing about every 1 to 2 hours. Trying to run a 201K at 7,000 RPMs continuously, or at least on an ongoing basis, is probably going to stress those parts on that machine quite a bit. But lubrication might be able to give you a little bit more freedom to do that. So. Yeah, that doesn't help. I think that's worse, isn't it, when I do that? I'm trying to get the right angle with this silly webcam. It just... I'll just leave it there. Again, just showing you the side of the motor. The motor has so many components that need to be optimized, and that's why I dig into the motor quite deep and also give it a flush as well. This is the the junction area that was cracked and broken on the machine. And you can see all the electricity connections that run into there. That's why it's so dangerous to have that part compromised, because it not only supports the motor when the motor's running, but it also houses all of that electricity junction points, all of those electricity junction points. I wish I could get rid of that glare. I just can't get rid of that glare for some reason. And then we're looking at the data plate on the motor. It goes into basic things like the voltage, the ohms, and all that kind of stuff. And there I found actually a section of that support junction area underneath the motor, where when it had broken, a chunk of it came off as well, and it was actually floating around in the motor case area, which is, that's not a good thing. There's a clearer picture of it. You can see where that chunk is missing right there, right next to one of the central electrical components right here. This is a junction that they use so that the motor could be plugged into 110 or 220 without it compromising the components of the motor itself. It's basically the equivalent of like a converter, is how it acts as the voltage changes for the machine. I don't think I'll be hooking up a machine to a lawnmower anytime soon, but that's an interesting idea. There again, you just get an idea of the filth and the condition of the machine. And again, with the motor acting as a vacuum cleaner right here, it's going to be pulling all of this stuff in and circulating it around through the machine. Just some of the bolts and the screws that are taken out as you're trying to deep clean the machine and service all the points of it that you can. But look at all that buildup down there. It just gives you an idea of the last time this machine got a serious deep cleaning and service, which it was probably never from its inception in 1964. And there again is that junction point. Look at all the copper contacts that are built into, molded into that support casing that also supports the motor. And right now it's split all the way down the middle, right there. Click it twice. But see, this is the motor and everything else is only supported by this and the one on the other side. So when one is damaged this badly, the motor is not even running true either, because it's out of alignment, because this is cracked all the way through. And there again, you can see just from the evidence in my hands just how bad off this is from a standpoint of being clean. And clean is it's not overrated. A machine that is clean and maintained properly, it's going to perform at such a higher level than any other machine that's similar to it. There you can see again the cracking here where the piece is still missing, and then it's split all the way down the middle. Look at all these wires coming into these different junction points of this electrical junction area. It had to have taken a huge hit, dropped, or some other huge impact to cause this level of damage inside. And there you can see the two halves that were only being held together by the tension of the wires is all that was holding them together. Here you got in the back the motor, and then all of the connections as well that have been disconnected to be able to do this repair on it. And that's a service I talked about right here that you want to be before you add any kind of adhesive, and you don't want to be crazy with the adhesive, or it's going to get on these copper contacts as well. You want to clean this area with a nice clean brush, get into all those little crevices, all those little grooves, and then put a light layer of an epoxy on here before you join the two pieces back together again. A lot of people just slap some sort of an adhesive on here, but they never clean the surface, and it won't last that way. It just won't last because this environment there's quite a bit of heat that's generated from the motor, and it'll eventually cause that to break down. See all this stuff here on my thumb. This has it's such a mess. It's such a mess. And I think that's back to the beginning again. We went full circle. Oh no, we didn't. We didn't go full circle yet. We still have a couple pictures we haven't seen. So these are some of the solutions that I use. This one here is going to strip all the stuff off the area that's going to be glued. And this actually helps to almost kind of soften the plastic so that it increases the porousness of it. And it's more receptive to receiving that epoxy to hold those two halves together. Here's where I'm actually cleaning it with that cleansing solution to get all the stuff out of all those pores. Anything that's stuck in those pores is going to reduce the adhesive factor. And there's my little brush that I love to use to get all those areas nice and clean. And there's some of that clear epoxy that I use. It's a one-stage epoxy. Epoxy comes in a two-stage, and it comes in a one-stage epoxy. I use a one-stage because it's just a lot more efficient. But you really have to move quick because it sets much faster than the two-stage does, obviously. Carefully using a dental tool to get it into the right spots without getting it into these areas that are part of the electrical field. Again, you have to really control it carefully. There you can see the actual one-stage epoxy. I'm just showing it to you, and then I'm going to put these together very quickly, which we've done right there. You can see a little bit of the excess residue. You don't want to leave that. You want to clean that up, which is what I do next. And I've got a little bit of a solution on there with a Q-tip swab just to get that surface nice and clean so that it's not all goopy. And that's the beginning where we started. So I'm going to close that. And we're going to go back to the machine now. And when we return, we'll look at a few more progress shots before we wrap this live stream up. But I really want you to appreciate why seeing these progress shots is so important. Not only, as many of you have told me, not only because it teaches you things about the machine that you can then do to your own machine, but it's also going to give you an appreciation for the depth of my process. If you're not a do-it-yourself person and you love seeing this stuff, but you're like, there's no way I'm going to do that. There's no way. Then when you make that investment of sending the machine here, it gives you an appreciation for the level of care that your machine is going to get. All right, I'm going to set all this. It's a little bit awkward. I'm carrying a laptop and I'm carrying the camera as well, kind of back and forth so that we can look at this from different angles. You know, I'm trying not to drop anything in the process. And I did eventually, if you're joining the live stream late, I did have the free arm on here, but trying to get the right camera angle without all the glare was tough. So I took the extension bed off of the free arm, and that way I can get the camera a little bit closer to the sewing action without all the glare factors. So this does have a beautiful extension bed, but I took it off because it was creating some challenges. And I want you guys to be able to see things nice and clear. I don't want you to have to struggle and guess, okay, I wonder what he's trying to show us there. So, and if you're also joining the live stream a little bit late, we've already done all of these sew-offs on camera today. I'll just kind of show you. We did the 3 layers of saddle grade leather. Crazy thick stuff. My weak attempt to try to stitch around the cutouts I did of this pumpkin. The stitch quality is great, The sewing technique was less than brag-worthy, but it was fun to do. It was fun to do nonetheless. And then we did 2 layers of genuine elk hide, laying down a straight stitch. And again, Nancy's 1964 19E special did just a phenomenal job. And again, look at the thickness of that. That's thicker than a man's belt. And the machine did just a phenomenal job. And then with this protected full grain leather, if you joined the live stream a little bit late, I did kind of a let's sew in circles for fun. And Nancy's machine did just a spectacular job of maintaining stitch quality through all of these turns. And again, protected full grain leather comes with a coating on the top of it to protect it against stains and to galvanize the surface. So even though it's thinner than the other leathers we sewed, it's still a very tough, tricky leather to sew. And from the lock stitch to the top stitch, this 1964 19E special did just a spectacular job. So what we're going to try to sew now is some 100% cotton. And I'm going to let you pick the color as I did in the other premiere. Let me kind of move the camera a little bit so I can show you what we have as far as choices. We got this pretty purple. Kind of fun to say pretty purple, isn't it? We've got this, and I'm not really good with colors. You guys know that. This is kind of a reddish burgundy, blah, 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 whatever it is. It's almost kind of a red color, pretty color. So we can either go with purple, red. I've got kind of I would call it kind of a burgundy color, but I'm not sure what you would call it. Then we have this mauve or kind of a pinkish color, 100% cotton. And then last but certainly not least, we have this blue 100% cotton as well. So if you want to type into the chat whether you want me to stitch with the blue, the mauve pink colored one, the burgundy colored one, if I can get it, the red one, or the purple one, and I'll cut a strip and we'll stitch off on that next. So we can look at the light side of the machine too. It's fun to sew the heavy leathers, but I also want to demonstrate the machine sewing much lighter too. So what do you guys think? So Emma wants to see the red one with the gold thread. I think that would be cool looking. Yeah, and Dr. T is making some remarks about epoxies. I am not an epoxy expert, but I have worked with a number of different type of adhesives in doing different types of repairs. And you know what? The surface, the preparation is as important as the epoxy or the adhesive that you're working with. That's part of the reason I showed you those shots of preparing the surface to receive the epoxy or adhesive. Because if you don't do that, you're going to have short-term success, but the long-term result is going to be you're going to be back at square one again. So it's a combination of the materials you're using, the product you're using, and also the preparation as well. So since there isn't anyone else, yeah, and Dr. T is agreeing as well, going with the red and the gold thread. So let's do that. I'm going to move this purple out of the way. We'll keep the red here. Get rid of the burgundy, get rid of the pinkish mauve stuff, get rid of the blue. And I'll get my scissors and we'll prepare some of this for stitching next. I've got to do a real quick cleaning on my specs as well. It's kind of one of those mysteries. How do your glasses get dirty so easily just using a sewing machine, just sitting there? It just shows you again environmental conditions, and depending on where you decide to set up your sewing machine, like I talked about the other day, setting it up too close to the kitchen if you're going to be cooking with greasy things is definitely not a good idea. Setting it up near a window that you open for ventilation and there's a lot of dust outside and other stuff like that, it'll get into your machine, it'll get on your machine. And you don't want to have your machine getting exposed to continuous UV light either. Having some sort of a tint on your windows or blinds to keep your machine safe from excessive UV light, where it can impact the patina of the machine, is also important when you're setting up your sewing space. All of those factors, and always a space that's going to give you natural lighting along with the machine lighting as well, is really important, so you don't get fatigued as easily. So many things to consider. It's just crazy, isn't it? So let's set some of this 100% cotton up next. And I'm not looking at the chat closely. I'm glancing periodically because I know that Sunny and Emma, and if Paula is here, I don't know if Paula's here or not, but they're all keeping an eye on things and interacting with you folks, which is fabulous. And you're interacting with them, which is awesome. But Paula is really the one that kind of inspired me to take a step away from just doing hardcore heavy duty sewing, and also sewing the softer side as well, is kind of why I ended up moving towards the cottons and the silks and the satins. So, I love your input. All of you have so many brilliant ideas, and you're so smart, and I'm made better because of it when I'm smart enough to follow your brilliant suggestions. So good stuff. Good stuff. We all learn from each other, don't we? I think we do. Okay. What do I have here? My scissors are getting kind of dull, so I frayed it a little bit. Now, the other input I would like to ask of you is, as I get this set up underneath the presser foot, would you like me to sew a straight stitch on this, a zigzag, a 3-point zigzag, or a blind hem stitch? We can do any of those stitches with this 19E special, and I want your input on what stitch you would like me to select: straight, zigzag, 3-point zigzag, or blind hem stitch. And you can give me two options if you want, because we'll do one down this row and we'll do one down. I've got the camera wrong. We'll do one down this row and we'll do one down the other row. So tell me what kind of stitch you'd like to see, if you would. Standard zigzag is what Emma would like to see. Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Dr. T, as far as cleaning glass. I agree. And that's the thing is, sometimes you're cleaning what you think is glass, and it's plastic, or it's some version of plastic. So you have to be careful you don't scratch surfaces, don't you? So I'm only getting one stitch so far. So I'm going to jump into a zigzag, which requires that we do a change on the back of this. And again, when you're changing the dial on the back of this machine to go to a different stitch option, you want to take this down to 0 on the stitch width. It recalibrates that finger on the back that reads that cam. So we take it down to 0, and then, give me just a second here. Then we got to go to the rear of the machine, over to here, and we got to turn this knob to the stitch that we want. Right now we're on 3-point zigzag, and we got to get ourselves over to this regular zigzag that Emma wants to see. And then obviously to the other side of that is the blind hem. So we're going to give this a rotation. So now we're on zigzag. And again, if you ever have a 19E special and you go to turn this and it's just jiggly, it's because you forgot to recalibrate that stitch width down to 0. It releases that mechanism, allows this to re-engage so that it's locked in like it is right now. Okay, so we're on zigzag now. Let's go around and set the things on the front of the machine. Hold on just a second. I've got this all tangled from going back and forth between the workbenches. All right, so let's set this up over here now. There we go. So we're going to do a zigzag, and now we have to decide, okay, we'll do a wide zigzag on 4. Where are we going to set our stitch length for the zigzag? We can go real short, or we can go much further over and give it a longer length. What I usually try to do is I usually try to come close to matching the two numbers. So if I'm on 4 down here, or let's say I decided to go to 3, then I'm going to match the stitch length to keep it in proportion on 3 as well. So now we have this on 3, we have this on 3. Okay? So if that's acceptable, now we're going to try this 100% cotton and see what we think of this 19E special. We've already shown that it can handle the heavy side. Now we're going to try the lighter side. And normally we would adjust the presser foot pressure, which is inside of this faceplate right here. We would make an adjustment on the presser foot pressure right here. And if you rotate this to the rear, it's going to decrease. As you rotate it to the front on this machine, it's going to increase. And then we also have a quick release on here as well. If you push this little tab, let's say instead of putting a couple layers of 100% cotton underneath the presser foot, we were trying to put a real thick quilt or something. Then we can push this release, and then all of a sudden, let me see if I can do it with my thumb. It's a little sticky. This is a little sticky right now. I'll have to take a look at that. Normally what this will do, but I've got it wound all the way up right now, is it'll drop down and it'll take all the presser foot pressure off, which would allow you then to push the presser foot bar up to fit something much thicker in there. So I'll have to add just a little bit more lubricant to it. That's what happens when you go through a machine and you do a lot of deep cleaning, you get rid of a lot of the crud, is it'll loosen up, but as the machine sets, it'll stiffen up a little bit. So it's good to double check things and triple check things and make sure that those different components of the machine stay loose and free moving. All right, so let's try this 100% cotton now. And we're going to be laying down a zigzag with a setting of 3 and 3 on it. All right, here we go. Take up arm all the way up. Here we go. So this is a zigzag that we just laid down right now. Slide this out a little bit. We'll take a look at this. And again, you can change the look of this entirely by adjusting that stitch width or stitch length to a different setting. Beautiful, beautiful stitching. I'm just going to cut these threads and then we'll look at that lock stitch on the back. So this is our lock stitch now that we're looking at here. Let's take a look at that as well and see if we can compare it to the top stitch, see if there's any difference at all in the look of it. I don't think we're going to see any difference. It'll be a mirror and match of the other one. Beautiful, beautiful stitching. So between the lock stitch, again on this 100% cotton, and the top stitch, we've got a page 34 stitch, which shows us that the machine can not only manage heavy grade leather, but it can also manage the lighter side as well with 100% cotton. So now we're going to lay down another stitch next to it. I'm going to look at the chat and see if there's any suggestions on what you'd like to see, and then we'll go ahead and lay that stitch down. Is the camera view okay now, Emma? And Emma's wanting to see a blind hem stitch next to that. Emma, is the camera angle okay now? You said the camera angle was off a little bit. Okay, good. Yeah, give me feedback on that because I'm trying to manage all kinds of things on this end, and I might forget to shift the camera, or I might have it angled a little bit different. And I love this webcam that Emma was so kind to give me. It's a wonderful resource, but it responds differently to light than my other camera. So I've really got to kind of goof around with things a little bit sometimes so that there's not a glare or a shadow that you guys are seeing on your end. I want you to be able to see things crystal clear. And it takes a little bit more effort sometimes when you're trying to tweak it a little bit. So, all right, so we're going to do a blind hem next, right? First thing we need to do is we need to take our stitch width all the way down to 0 in preparation for adjusting that knob on the back. So it frees up that mechanism so we can change it. So let's go to the back of the machine. And now we're looking at that cam adjuster on the back. You can see right now we're set on the zigzag, but Emma wants us to go to the blind hem, which is over here. So now we're going to rotate this over to the blind hem. It really is quite simple, isn't it? As long as you remember to recalibrate that stitch width so that this mechanism releases and locks in place properly. And now we're going to need to make our choice as far as the settings for this blind hem stitch. You set it. Emma, do you have a preference? I can set it on 3 and 3 like before, like we did on the other one, or we could go with something a little bit wider, a little bit more narrow, because it's going to change the look of that stitch quite a bit depending on what we choose for stitch width for the blind hem and stitch length. I would generally recommend for a blind hem that we go a little bit on the shorter end, somewhere between 0.5 and 2, but I'll let Emma pick this time for us, okay? So let me see if she's expressed any preference. Okay, so Emma's saying let's go a little bit more narrow. Let's go a little bit more narrow. Okay, so let's do this. We'll go with a 2 as far as stitch width, and we'll try to match the stitch length at 2 as well. So where we went with 3 and 3 before, now we're going to be going with 2 and 2. Okay, we could set it anything we want to set it at, anywhere between 1 and 4, anywhere here between 0.5 and around 4. But we're going to try to match them on 2 and 2 right at this time. So 2 2. We don't do a thing with our needle position unless we choose to do that. So that's it. That's it. Let's get this set up. So now we're going to be doing a blind hem stitch next. Blind hem. Get that thread a little bit more advanced on there. Okay, so now a blind hem stitch. Let's give this a go, see what we think. Well, what we think is it didn't come out to be a blind hem. I must not lock that in place properly. Yeah, what we got is we got a more narrow zigzag. I didn't get a blind hem. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let's see what we have going on. Oh, I didn't have it clicked all the way into place. See that? The simpler they make it, the easier it is to make mistakes. Let's see if I did it right this time. All right, let me cut another piece of cotton because I just goofed that one up. Yeah, I agree with you, Emma. It's a good looking stitch, but it's not what I wanted. And I did test the blind hem on this, so I know it works. Well, like I said, as you release mechanisms, they sometimes can stiffen up a little bit again. So we'll have to see. And the temperatures here have been fluctuating a lot. Temperature can also affect a machine, can't it? Yeah. All right, take two. Let's see if we got it set properly this time. Well, it's good for you to see me make mistakes like that because I talked about recalibrating. I talked about setting the cam so that it's going to sew properly. And then I did it wrong anyway. So anyone can make mistakes, and that's how we learn, isn't it? We don't always nail it. And this again is a, oh, you know what I forgot to do though for Emma? I'm going to have to do this a second time because when I was recalibrating that reader on the back of there so that it would pick up the blind hem instead of the zigzag, I forgot to adjust the stitch width back to a narrow setting. So we're going to sew it a second time, but we're going to make it more narrow than it is now. Beautiful stitching, beautiful stitching. And that's our lock stitch on the back. I just kind of show it to you straight away. Lock stitch and top stitch. Gorgeous, gorgeous stitching. Now I have to re-sew it more narrow so that we can see that effect as well. Okay, let's try this again. So I'm going to move the stitch width now from, it was on 4, move it all the way back down to 2, which is where I wanted to sew it originally. So 2 and 2. Let's see what this looks like in comparison to the first one we did. Yeah, that does change the look of it. I like the first one better, to be honest with you, kind of the pointiness of it, but everyone looks at stitching differently, don't they? So there's the second one there. The first one was done on a stitch length of 2 and a stitch width of 4. The second one was done on a stitch length of 2, but a width of 2. So 2 and 2, and this was 4 and 2. So they look very different, don't they? And again, we're sewing with embroidery thread using a 9014 Schmetz universal needle. And this is 100% cotton that we're sewing right now. Yeah. It's just amazing when you see the impact that stitch width and stitch length have on the look and the presentation of the stitch, isn't it? It's just fascinating. You never realize it until you see it, the impact you can bring. And that's why I say, even if you have a machine that only does straight in zigzag, when you start altering the stitch width and stitch length, you can get a huge array of stitch outputs that look very, very different from each other just by adjusting the width and the length. So we got room for one more stitch. And maybe what we can do is we can either stick with a blind hem and make some more adjustments on stitch width and stitch length, or we can go to a totally different stitch. Oh, did Irene already step away? If Irene is still there, hi Irene, I'm sorry you have a headache. A migraine headache is horrible. All the needle position will do, Emma, is offset the stitch a little bit. It would almost be the equivalent of making a seam allowance by changing the position of the needle, whether it's far left or far right. So it's not going to change the look of the stitch. It's going to change the needle position and give you that offset factor. Well, I hope Irene feels better. I've got family members that get migraines sometimes, and it's absolutely debilitating when you're battling a migraine like that. Hey, hi, Irene. Good to see you. Good to see you, dear. And migraines are so individualized. For one person, if they eat dark chocolate or drink a diet Pepsi or diet Coke, it'll help to reduce the symptoms. For some, it doesn't do any good at all. So I think what we'll do now is we'll finish off this last sew off on the cotton, and we'll change this. We'll stick with the blind hem for right now, and I'll just change the settings. We've gone with wider, narrower. Now we'll go all the way down. Let's see here. Let's really try something extreme. We'll go all the way to 4 on stitch width, and on stitch length, we'll also go to 4. We'll go max and max just to see what look difference we get with the 100% cotton doing this blind hem stitch. So now we've made everything at the max. We'll see what we get now. All right, here we go. So you can see straight away the different rows, all the same stitch. All we did was change the factor of stitch width and stitch length. Very, very different looks. Very cool. And I'll show you the lock stitch as well real quick. This is the lock stitching for those 3 rows that we did with the blind hem stitch. Just so you can see comparatively. And again, when you're sewing certain materials, you might have to make modest adjustments to the upper tension. But all in all, we've got some really, really good stitch integrity, great stitch presentation. And also, the wider you go with a stitch, you might have to make adjustments to that upper tension as well, because you're stretching that thread further across the material. Top stitch again, and then we'll set this to the side as a pass. Beautiful stitching. And again, 100% cotton is, it can be a little bit on the tricky side depending on the stitching that you're doing and the settings you're using. Some really pretty stitching though. So I'll throw that to the back as well with our other stitch offs we've already done. And what I'll probably do is one more stitch off, and then we're going to pop over and take a little bit more look at the progress shots and wrap that side of the live stream up as well. But the first thing I'm going to do is a little bit of veg tan leather. This is real fun leather to work with because it's a little bit of a softer leather and it's not quite as slippery as the Italian leather. So it's kind of fun to work with. But you can see 2 layers. It's probably about 8 ounces of leather, 6 to 8 ounces of leather. Once the camera decides it's going to cooperate with us. I'll show it to you like that. Maybe that'll be easier for the camera. And I think we'll lay down a straight stitch and then lay down a blind hem next to it. Okay, so to get back to a straight stitch again, it's quite simple. We just take our stitch width over to 0. And if we want to go with a long straight stitch, we leave it on 4. Or we can back it off a little bit and go shorter on it too. I think we'll go max. So 4 and down on 0. So we've got a straight stitch, and then we'll lay down a blind hem next to it. And again, we're sewing with a 1964 Viking Husqvarna 19E special. No cams have to be inserted into it. It already has a cam stack built into the rear of the machine. So all you have to do is turn that knob on the back, and you're able to go between straight stitching, zigzag, 3-point zigzag, and blind hem stitch. All right, here we go. Straight stitch, again, 2 layers. And you know what I forgot to do? Hold on a second. Forgot to put these back to back so we don't have to deal with that nap factor. So let me turn that and we'll put these back to back. So we've got a clearer look of that straight stitch on the top and on the bottom. Okay, so a standard straight stitch and then a blind hem stitch next to it. Here we go. Move that light to the side a little bit. There we go. This is going to be a tough one to see because of that light leather color. Super light leather color. Matter of fact, I'll tell you what. Let me take it out and then we'll see if we can get a slightly different camera angle so you can see the stitching a little bit more clearly. There we go. That's the top stitch there. Maybe vertically is the easiest way, huh? It's a lot harder than you guys would think to try to get this lined up with the proper lighting, especially when the material is super light and the thread is super light as well. It is tricky. It is tricky to try to get it lined up correctly. And this webcam is having a little bit of trouble adjusting to it, probably because of the color. Ugh. We'll stick with that angle. That's probably a lot better. And it keeps going out of focus. All right, lock stitch. I'm going to go blind if I keep trying to do this. That's our lock stitch. Hopefully you can see that. The color of the thread and the material are just not, if you're here in the workshop, you can see it clearly, but through the camera, this camera is having a lot of trouble adjusting to that. All right, let's get it back underneath the needle and do that blind hem stitch down the side of it. Okay, so on the blind hem, I'm going to go ahead and take us back to 4 on stitch width, and I'm going to adjust our stitch length way down, right around to 1. So 1 on, and normally I would match them like 1 and 1 or 4 and 4, but we're going to go ahead and do 1 on stitch length and 4 on stitch width. Let's see what we get. I think it'll be pretty cool. I should have just put it underneath the presser foot. That's a lot easier to see it that way, isn't it? Okay, so now we're going to lay down a blind hem stitch. Let's see what we think of this. Here we go. Oops, I think I lost my, hold on a second, I lost my bobbin thread. Did I run out of bobbin thread? I might have with all the sewing I was doing. Let's see. Nope, it just misfed. Hold on a second. Let's finish this off. This is actually a good opportunity that I can show you exactly how to line this up. Holding the bobbin case in your left hand. Bobbin case in your left hand. There we go. Where is it? And the bobbin in your right with the thread coming over the top, so that this is eventually going to be turning clockwise. Bring it back through. See the way it's turning? All right, let's give this a try again. All right, we'll pick it off where we left off here. Well, where that bobbin thread caught a little bit, we're going to have a little bit of an oddity there, but that's okay. I'll sew into the other one. All right, take 2 or take 3 or whatever this is. Here we go. Oh, Jiminy Crickets. That's okay. 4, 1. No, that's correct. I thought I forgot to change the stitch width back, but I didn't. Okay. It must be a Saturday. It must be a Saturday. And then what we did is we ended up inverting these where one is pointing one way and one is pointing the other way, which is fine. I may have to check that bobbin case to see maybe we have a little burr on there, because I'm getting a little bit of a snag on there as I'm trying to advance this, and it should move very freely. I'm going to give that a clip, and I'm going to check that bobbin case real quick to see if it's developed a burr on there, which sometimes they can do. That's the original bobbin case that came with the machine. Take a look at that. I don't feel a burr, but the other thing that can sometimes happen is the air has been real dry here as we've started to move closer into winter. I did swab the inside of this with a little bit of machine oil, which you should do periodically so that that bobbin can move freely, but it was probably a couple days ago. So I'm going to grab a little bit of machine oil and swab the inside of that bobbin case real quick, just in case we're getting a little bit of drag on there. Even though I've done a thorough deep cleaning of this machine, you can see how quickly, depending on the cleanliness of the materials and just all the environmental factors, how quickly it can pick up junk on the bobbin case, because it's inside of that raceway where all of that stuff, again, pushed by the motor, comes through there. So all right. So it's pretty elementary, I know, but hold on to the thread in the back as you rotate the balance wheel towards you to pull that thread up from the bobbin case. And you can see when it misfeeds, when that bobbin case catches the thread in there, like it'll misfeed and the advance of the process is stopped, but the thread is still feeding from the top. So you get a little bit of a mess up like that on the bottom. But it's an easy thing to fix as long as you know what to do. So now we're looking at the stitch quality here, which looks absolutely spectacular, other than my little debacle in the middle. think I found you can see it better this way. Let me do that. We're going to stitch that again now that we've resolved the issue down in the bobbin case. Yeah, sometimes if the needle gets a burr on it as well, Sonny, absolutely, it can cause issues with pulling that thread up. I'm going to try the first thing that I did. We'll try stitching it off again. If we have a feed factor again coming out of the bobbin case, then I could always change the needle out. But I think the needle is okay at this point. But that's a great insight. All right, let's give this a try again. See if we can get this to feed properly. All right, here we go. And I'm doing it a little bit differently this time. I've got it folded over to 2 layers. I do not have it cut in 2 layers. Creates a little bit more of a ridge, but I think we should be okay. We have enough presser foot pressure. All right, let's try this again. We'll turn that light away. It's actually easier to see without that light on it. The same thickness of leather, 2 layers of vegetable tan leather. All we did was, because that thread was snagging down there in the bobbin case, it was a little bit, it picked up some dirt and it was a little bit dry. And all I did was swab it with a little bit of machine oil. And it's a much happier machine now. Exactly the way we want to be seeing it. It's kind of fun to encounter problems. I mean, it's probably more fun for you than it is for me during a live stream, but we still learn from them. And that's the most important thing in the classroom is things don't always go exactly like we plan, but as long as we can overcome the obstacle, that's what we're looking to do. This webcam is so much more challenging to work with when it comes to focusing. than my other camera. All right, we got a great stitch. We got a great stitch, and it was just a simple solution to get the machine back on track. Now we're going to go back to a straight, and then we're going to jump back over to some progress shots. And we're running much longer than I anticipated running, but that's okay. That's okay. Better with the light off now. It's a little finicky camera. It's a little fickle finicky. All right, let's try a straight stitch now. All right, here we go. Just curious. That's with the LED light on. Yeah, let's leave it on. Here we go. Okay, let's take a look at this again. See if the camera will be nice to us. So those are the two stitch rows that I'm finally able to show you after getting the lighting right and resolving the bobbin case issue. Bobbin cases, we kind of forget about them, and they're so essential to the sewing process, as we just witnessed. And we've got an absolutely page 34 drop dead gorgeous straight stitch and also a blind hem. And again, we're sewing through 2 layers of vegetable tan leather, which is about 8 ounces, 8 to 10 ounces of leather. And we're using a size 90-14 universal Schmetz needle. And Sunny's suggestion a little bit before, as far as the needle, if a needle develops a little barb on it, a little jagged edge, basically, it can create havoc, just like we were experiencing. But I suspected that it was bobbin case related. And if that hadn't worked, then we would have followed the idea of changing out that needle. Sometimes, depending on how that needle hits the material, it'll develop a barb on it. It's no fault of the needle. It's no fault of the operator. It just is. And so Sunny's hunch was right spot on if the bobbin case didn't resolve the issue. Beautiful stitching, right? Absolutely beautiful stitching. So it's a good reminder to us all. Periodically, part of the maintenance should also include your checking your needles always, but also servicing that bobbin case just a little bit as well. That bobbin case can really make or break you when it comes to how that machine responds to the sewing process. We've got space for one more stitch, and what I might do is just change it back to a zigzag real quick. Although I love that 3-point zigzag too. All right, this is going to be our last stitch on the vegetable tan leather. Our last stitch on the veg tan leather. Okay, so I've changed the machine back to a 3-point zigzag. Let's go ahead and knock this out. We'll jump into some progress shots. And I don't have much in the way of sew-offs left. We might just wrap up this live stream. It's run a lot longer than I expected. I'm so grateful for all of you hanging in there. And you know what? It's worthwhile because we end up having a hiccup with the bobbin case. I show you how to troubleshoot that and resolve that, and then we move forward with the machine just being totally back on pace again. So there's all kinds of unexpected things we can encounter, and they become learning lessons through a live stream like this. So that's cool. That's totally cool. Okay, so a 3-point zigzag. Let's see what we get and not throw a fit, as one of my teachers used to say. Never quite got that, but whatever. so I'm setting the stitch length at 2.5. I'm setting the stitch width at 2.5. Let's see what we get with this 3-point zigzag. Here we go. What we got kind of a snaky pattern. That's kind of fun because we made it quite a bit longer than we normally would. So that one on the far left is the one we just did. And you can see all 3 rows right now with the current lighting that we have, which is yay. I've been battling that lighting this whole live stream. I've got to come up with a solution. I don't think it's an issue necessarily with the camera. It's probably just an issue of the environmental lighting I've got in here. Beautiful stitching, right? Beautiful stitching. And again, if you're just joining the live stream, we're sewing on 2 layers of vegetable tan leather. 2 layers of vegetable tan leather using a Schmetz 9014 universal needle, and we're using that tri-lobal Coates & Clark embroidery thread. Folks, that is a solid page 34 stitching. Let's take a look at the lock stitch. I'm just going to feed the thread out a little bit, and then we'll flip it over and look at that. And then we're going to jump through these progress shots. I might do one more sew off, but we'll try to wrap this up because we need to wrap it up. So this, unless I turned it around somehow, this should be our lock stitch. Let's take a look at this. We'll flip it over again and look at the other side too, in case I got it turned around somehow. Yeah, that's our lock stitch. Yeah, I'm seeing gorgeous stitching. I don't know what you can see through the webcam, but the spacing, the formation, the integrity of the stitch is exactly as we want to see it. Between the blind hem, the straight stitch in the middle, and then that 3-point zigzag that we have way stretched out right now. We're almost making it look like a snaky stitch, aren't we? Beautiful, beautiful stitching. And this again is our top stitch that we're looking at now. Isn't it interesting, after all of the work that I poured into this 19E special, and as broken as it arrived, something as simple as a little bit of extra environmental dirt getting into that bobbin case and it being slightly dry could just totally derail us for a second. And we were able to get back on track with a Q-tip swab and some sewing machine oil. Isn't that great? And because you've seen that happen to me on this live stream, instead of, if you're way off somewhere and you aren't able to get the machine to the workshop and you got a time sensitive thing and you all of a sudden start encountering what we did, where that bobbin thread isn't feeding and the machine is just losing its momentum. If it's as easy to fix as that, you can avoid a service call going to your local service center by just doing what we did. And then you've got page 34 stitching again. So sometimes problems are easy to fix and you can get back on track as easily as we did. Sometimes they're a little bit more complicated. But I like veg tan leather. If you've never sewn it before, I would encourage you to pick some up and try it out. It's such a beautiful leather to work with. I think it's part of the reason Dusty over in Colorado works almost exclusively with different types of veg tan leather. You know, they've dyed it a little bit darker or whatever it is. And also depending on where it comes off of the hide, that changes it as well. But it really is a lovely leather to stitch on, and it's receptive to embroidery thread as well, as you can see. So you can do some fun stuff with it. Let me throw that to the back. That's our pile back there that we kind of created through this process of we've had a couple of bumps, but it's all well and good. It's all well and good. It's fun to encounter struggles sometimes so we can come up with solutions, isn't it? Kind of fun. I mean, it's more fun for you than it is me, but oh, that's fine. All right, let me see if I can bring this camera back over again. I don't know if I'll do this again as far as jumping back and forth, moving the laptop, and then it's a little bit tricky, but that's okay. You guys are worth it. You guys are worth it. All right, back to progress shots. Let's take a look at these a little bit. Also, see if I can get a little bit of background music on. I think that's nice. Well, let's change this out. Type in. Some of you know I'm a former trumpet player, so I sometimes just enjoy trumpet sounds. They're kind of nice, aren't they? So after I discovered that this junction point that all the electrical wiring ties into, and that this also supports the motor as well, after I discovered that this machine had taken a drop, I had to mend all this together. I could not find this part, but I ended up building that up a little bit with an epoxy to fill that space in as well. Because this is not only a connection junction point, it's also, like I said, a support for the motor. And as the motor runs, it torques and flexes a little bit. So this has to be nice and sturdy to support that motor along with the other side. There, I'm just doing some detail cleaning. I loved my magnifiers. This particular set, it had some sort of an electrical glitch, so the light doesn't work anymore, but I've got another set that I can put on in place of it. And there we're looking at some of the excess one-stage clear epoxy that I use. And again, don't leave that. If you do a repair, go ahead and take a second and clean that up. And there, you just have to wait. You got to be patient. It kind of delays the project a little bit, but that epoxy, even though it's fast setting, I let it go through a full cure before I take those rubber bands off that are holding it together under tension, and then connect all the wires again, and then get it anchored back into place so it can adequately be that junction point for all the electricity, but also support that motor properly. We're talking about a 1 amp motor that, it when it kicks in, it's serious. So that really needs to be a sturdy piece as part of the machine setup. I forgot that was in here. Good old Snoopy. What is the name of that little bird? Do you guys know the name of that little bird? Is that Woodstock? Okay. I do use a solution to wick all of that extra epoxy off of there, Dr. T, to answer your question. Or that was Miranda, or Miranda. That was Irene that asked that question, I think. Wait a second. No, that was Emma that asked the question. I use a special solution, Emma, to get that extra epoxy off of there. I don't just wipe it off with a dry Q-tip swab, to answer your question. Um, okay, bye, Irene. I hope you feel better, dear. Yeah, so that's Woodstock and Snoopy sitting at the fire. I love fireplaces. I really do. They're fabulous, aren't they? Getting that last piece in place there so that that's a stable piece to support the motor and the electrical junction. More of that epoxy. And again, prepare the surface before you glue it, before you put that epoxy, whether it's a two-stage or a one-stage. That other support piece in there. And there's the complete junction point now. It's nice and stable. It's been mended properly. And now it'll be a safe piece to support all of that electricity running through the machine, and also be a proper support to the motor too. Busy workbench, all kinds of stuff going on. The motor is out, the bottom is off the machine. And if you ever wondered, will the top of the head sit level and not tip over when the base is off of it? It actually does. You know, if you're ever on a trivia contest thing or something, they say, well, will the top of a class 21 sit level if you're not supporting it? The answer is yes. Now you know. Now you know. Yeah. There's more of that junk. You really see it clearly, I think, in that shot. It was a very dirty Swedish beauty. I think, as I joked with Emma in one of our quick exchanges via text. She said, "What are you working on?" I said, "I've got a real dirty Swedish beauty on the workbench." So yeah, there you go. Trying to get all that out of there. The reason you get all of that out of there is this is where the motor sets right here. And if you don't get all of this junk out of there, as soon as you set the machine back up and you put it all the way back together again, this stuff eventually is going to dry. It's going to go airborne, and that motor is going to suck it right back in again. So all of the work you did on the motor is for nothing if you don't get this environment here clean as well. See how filthy that is? And again, if you go to a local service center, they're not going to do a thing with any of this. That's another degreaser that I use when I'm really fighting some tough stuff. And this stuff was just fused on there. So I cleaned it initially with a regular cleaning solution. That wasn't quite enough. Now I've added this additional degreaser to it to break that stuff down further and try to get it as clean as I possibly can. Cosmetic pads are not only good for the face, they're great for cleaning different parts of the machine too. And I like tweezers. You grab a hold of one of those cotton swabs or otherwise, and you can really get into those crevices nicely. Look at that stuff. Just, it's mind-blowing how filthy our sewing machines can get, isn't it? All this stuff has to come off as best as we can get it. Layer by layer by layer. More degreaser. It's starting to come together, isn't it? And no one asked the question, but I can tell you that when you incorporate this level of deep cleaning, because the machine needs it, the owner would never look down here in all likelihood. They wouldn't take the machine head off of the base. I could leave all that dirt down there and Nancy would never know it, but I would know it. And that's the workshop difference. When someone sends a machine here, it's not window dressing. It's get it right or don't do it at all. Well, I'm going to get it right. And that way, when the machine goes back to Ohio, it's going to be ready to get the job done right away and do it the long term with basic maintenance that that Nancy does to the machine. So all the little corners, getting rid of all of that stuff. when I get a little stir crazy in the workshop, sometimes I'll do goofy things, kind of like deciding to put gumballs out there, and you'll see the gumball slowly disappear as I pop them into my mouth. You got to have a little fun, you know what I mean? You got to have a little fun. Of course, it's a little gross how dirty my hands are and the fact that I'm popping gumballs into my mouth, but oh well. My mom used to say, God made dirt so dirt don't hurt. So that looks a little bit better, doesn't it? Yeah. That motor is almost ready to go back in, and it's not going to be sucking all that junk back in. That's obviously one of the motor brushes. And I've said before, you can operate a motor effectively with a motor brush that is at least 5 millimeters long. That's about as close to the minimum as you can get. And so I just decided to replace them because that one's not going to last long under heavy use. And we're about to, now that I've done the regular cleaning on the motor and the adjustments and the optimization, now we're going to do a bath for the motor with a special cleaning solution that's safe for an electric motor. And I think that's full circle, isn't it? Yeah, that's full circle. So now the bath for the motor. And this is all, even after the detailed cleaning I did of the motor, this is all the stuff that came out of it. And obviously, if you're going to give a bath to the motor, the solution you use has to be safe for an electrical environment. I use a special blend that I've developed. And the other thing is, you've got to make sure that you take the motor brushes out of the motor before you do this. Otherwise, it's going to ruin the motor brushes if you intend to continue to use them. Because carbon is very porous, and if it gets hit with any kind of a liquid, it's going to soften that carbon and make it basically worthless. There's that goofy guy that probably has those gumballs in his mouth right now. This is fully cured. I've taken all of the rubber bands off. The repair is done. It's ready to get reinstalled so it can support the motor and have all those electric wires connected to it again. Getting those wires seated back in there properly. That's one of the boots that supports the motor on the right side, I believe it is. Let me see, right, left side. And you also have to clean that as well because it's right in proximity to it's right in proximity to the motor. Yeah, another fun thing for Halloween. More deep cleaning, also doing some caliper measurements as far as the alignment of the motor. The pulley has to be aligned to the bobbin winding assembly, and a mechanical caliper is the best way to get it set right so that the belt is running true and it doesn't cause the belt to wear prematurely. More cleaning on the exterior of the motor, getting the motor mounted back in. Some adjustments. That's all buildup on there. And that's one of the crucial pivot points that runs down to the raceway. Um, this is part of the assembly that controls the feed dog drop. And that was all gummed up and had a lot of varnishing and buildup on it, as you can see. So a lot of deep cleaning on there to get it right. Some parts that need to be cleaned, some of the parts that need to be lubricated. So it's a mixture of the two when you're servicing a machine at this level. Lubricating some parts that are deep in that control the knobs on the front of the machine as well. Some additional inspections. There we've got the base mounted again, the motor's back in place, and we're moving towards being able to get the machine reassembled, final checks and services on it, and then get it to a point where it's ready for a premiere like today. Close inspections. Getting all the wires reconnected properly. And that's the thing, when you're taking wires off, you want to make sure you remember what wire goes where. All of these zones have different attributes. And if you connect it in the wrong way, you're either going to have a light that doesn't work, or you're going to have a motor that runs continuously. So, or you could get some sparks too, which is the worst case scenario. She always looks a little stern, doesn't she? But she's the niece of a king. What do you expect, right? And there you can see the contrast between the motor brushes. These are the original motor brushes here. They're right at the point of not being usable anymore. You could squeak them a little bit further, but not much. And then these are the replacement motor brushes that I use. I use a special motor brush and I make a few modifications to it so that it even draws more power out of the motor. You notice the setup is a little bit different, along with the copper lead that runs into the carbon stack as well. Verifying the measurement on the motor brushes. I covered that in a premiere recently where I showed you how to size and calibrate the motor brushes so that they work best in the motor. If you missed that, you can kind of go rewind on some of the recent posts and you'll be able to find it on this YouTube channel. These are a little bit long. They're going to create unnecessary pressure against the commutator, so I'm going to size them down just a little bit. Extra cleaning. These are the fan blades on the motor, and they are missed so often by people when they're doing a thorough service of the motor. This is obviously spinning when the motor is operating, and it's helping to draw some air in to keep the motor running cool, but it also draws all this stuff in as well. Just get an idea of the level of filth in this motor. The motor was running so labored. It was running so labored. Cleaning the bottom of the bed after it was reinstalled. Additional inspections and cleaning. This is the cam stack right here that is permanent by adjusting the knob, so you don't have to add any cams to the back of this machine like the other green machine, Swedish Beauties. There, I think I'm going to be doing some additional cleaning, and I'm also doing a mend on this as well so that bolt will actually anchor in there. Right now, these two halves are split, and so the back covers were jiggly on it, and I didn't want that to be the case. More cleaning. It never stops. I mean, you get what you think is clean, and then you go over it again, and you get more off of it. It's amazing how much dirt can get inside of the environment of the machine. There we've got that mended again, so it's going to be able to hold that cover down properly so there's no rattling, and it's just safer. You know what I mean? Having to port a little bit of a hole for the bolt to go in there because when I mended it, there was a little bit of an overlay of the plastic. Getting that cover reinstalled. cleaning up the basin that caught all of that dirt that came out of the motor. Bobbin winding assembly is now going to get, after all the adjustments were done at it, now it's going to get a bath too. Again, this assembly manages so many things. There are about 23 or 24 service points on this one mechanism. I love my typewriter brush. I use it for so many things. And there's a happy assembly now. That slow gear is going to work perfectly. The tracks that the belts run over have been properly serviced and cleaned. The adjustments have been made to this mechanism so that the clutch release, the auto clutch release, is working properly as well. And it's a proper working mechanism now. It makes a huge difference. A little bit more deep cleaning. It's a long process, you guys. You think that this live stream is running long. Take it times about 6 is how long the actual servicing of the machine takes. Looking a lot better. And that's actually a pin that the balance wheel mounts into so that there's positive traction. There's no slippage. A lot of balance wheels will just slide over a mounting shaft, but there's nothing to anchor it into position when that belt is turning it. This is a nice addition that the Swedish came up with. Side of the machine. There's that pin back in place again, and then the balance wheel slides over it. This is the old belt, obviously, and the new belt. I use a cog style replacement long belt because it provides better traction. There you can see the two up close. This one really should have been changed quite some time ago. All that's put back together. The cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. I love it. These are some of the random photos I stick in there just to make it kind of fun. And we've already looked at that, so I think we've gone full circle. Yep. We'll jump through these pretty quick, and then we'll do probably like 1 or 2 more sew-offs on the machine. I know you guys love to see the machine sew, but I want you to see what I took it through in order to get to this point where we're ready for the premiere today. I'm getting near the end here in the service process, and that's kind of a little grin on my face that, yay, we're almost done. Now, some of these components you're going to see are part of the original upper tension that had been put in here that came from a Singer or a Japanese clone style machine. It was not the proper upper tension, but even if it had been the proper one, this is a condition that it was in, so it was not a happy upper tension at all. Yeah, it's hard to see it, but this is all rust. The camera isn't picking it up real well. Yeah, the camera's not picking up the coloration of that very well, but this was all rusted. There you've got the upper tension torn all the way down. And I mean, there's so many parts to it. You can't just swab the discs and it's good. There's so much servicing that has to be done to it. Curious if that'll... Again, just showing you and the camera's not picking it up well. I can see it on the screen very clearly. This is all filth and buildup on the bottom. And this is the cover that goes over the free arm, the top of the free arm. Hopefully you can see some of that. But my point is this, in showing these pictures to you, this all has an impact on how the machine will perform. Because this piece right here and the other piece you saw is right over the raceway. It's right over the raceway, which is the brain center for the sewing machine. So all of this junk goes into that area where the stitches are being created, and it creates havoc there as far as that thread being able to feed properly. And even today in this live stream, you saw as simple as having a bobbin case that has picked up some dirt from the materials we're sewing as that needle passes down into there. And it had gotten dry a little bit, with as dry as the air is getting as we're moving into winter. Something as simple as that can cause the machine to have difficulties. Look at all this. And again, the camera's not seeing all of it for some reason, but it's just awful. No, that's a pretty shot. All part of the free arm assembly. There's so much to service in there. And that's part of our hook assembly right there. You can see all the junk that was built up in there as well. I think you can. Part of our upper tension. Nasty, right? Real nasty. Release pin. And that's the proper upper tension control right there that I ended up substituting for the one that was in the machine. This is part of that retaining plate, and this is the part right here because it's made out of it's a polymer material. The thread, as it's racing by there in the sewing process, will start to eat grooves into there. And so that's part of the normal servicing that I'll do to that particular area, is getting that surface smooth again. I use about 3,000 grit sandpaper and getting it down so it's the proper texture again, so that thread can move by without gripping it and without catching on it. There's our throat plate cover, and you can see it's gotten some hits, which typically happens when the machine is out of timing, or if someone, when they're moving the material over the feed dogs, gets anxious and they're either pulling or pushing that material, causing that needle to flex outside of the normal range of that throat plate opening, and then it ends up hitting the edge and causing scarring. The problem with the scarring is it'll catch that thread as it's coming up from that bobbin case, and then it'll cause that thread to either misfeed or to jam. I used initially 1,000 grit sandpaper and then all the way down to 3,000 grit to try to get that surface nice and smooth again without having to replace the throat plate cover. You can see it real clear there. That's all from needle strikes right here, right there. So it sometimes can be the user that causes the machine needle to go out of the normal range of motion within that throat plate opening, and sometimes it's a mechanical issue. My process eliminates both of them. And while I don't always sew straight, I never ever will try to muscle the feed dogs, um, with few exceptions where I'm trying to, like today, sewing that pumpkin, and I'm trying to work with a real malleable leather, and I'm trying to get that leather to follow the direction of the needle. Then I'll manipulate it a little bit, but I always try to leave the feed dogs alone as long as they're properly adjusted, as long as they're working properly in conjunction with the presser foot attachment, they will get the job done. Never ever pull or push material as it's going through. And if you're not getting good feed, check your presser foot pressure too. That can always be a factor too. Just showing you the filth on the bottom of the throat plate. Again, it's right above the brain center of the sewing machine where the raceway is, and you got to keep every part of that area clean. Part of the take-up arm that's inside of the faceplate area, you can see all the buildup and junk on there. There's that release. It's still a little bit sticky right now. I'm going to take care of that after the live stream, where when I pushed it in, it released, but it didn't allow this to drop down. So I'm going to take care of that. So it's working absolutely spot on before it heads back to Ohio. All the buildup and the junk, you kind of get an idea where you can clean something, you can re-clean it, but because the stuff is so dense and so packed in there, you might have to do a follow-up with it again. So many pivoting points inside of the faceplate that need attention. And when they're neglected, the stuff just builds up layer after layer. Look at even on the needle bar and the presser foot bar. That's all varnishing and filth built up on all of those areas. They were looking down on the raceway. Look at that. All the filth, even on here on the mounting plate. And we went full circle. Hey! Well, thank you for your patience. Thank you so much for your patience, as this live stream has gone so much longer than I expected, but we ran into some challenges. We overcame them. And now we're going to finish off one or two more show offs, and we're going to wrap this up. So thank you for all of you that hung in there from start to finish. You guys are champions. And we learned a lot through this live stream today. So that's equally good in the classroom. All right, let me see if I can get this back over to the other table, and we'll do some final sew offs on this really cool 1964 19E special. I'm having to wiggle all these cords around and everything, so there we go. There we got it, I think. Well, what I have left is I have another pumpkin that I cut out, and I have one piece of protected full grain leather left, and then stitch the outer border before we call it quits for this live stream. But easier, it's kind of like they take every play and stack it than that. But if you get them out on the field, they all of a sudden discover that it's much more difficult than they realized. Same thing when you're trying to do something like this. It's a lot trickier when you're sitting in front of the camera trying to do it than if you're in the comfort of your sewing room by yourself and you're trying to do the same thing. So I'll do my best. And I got to remind myself what stitch I have on there right now. So right now I have it on a 3-point zigzag. I think I'm going to change it back to a standard zigzag. make it quite a bit more narrow. Stitch length is pretty good, I think. Shorten it up a little bit more. I should show you what I'm doing. So stitch width I took down to right about 1.5. And we're going to be doing a zigzag around these different points. And then I'm taking this down to right around, I did 1.5 there. I might as well do 1.5 here. So 1.5, 1.5. Yep. Let's give this a try. Don't expect perfection, just a little bit of fun. And again, this is saddle grade leather. And I think I will engage, I'm going to engage the slow gear, I think. Give us a little bit of an edge. All right, here we go. I could have made that tighter. I could have made that even a little bit more narrow, but this all saddle grade leather is a little bit easier to work with than the other leather that I was using before, which, what is that? I think that's veg tan leather is a little bit trickier to work with. So yeah, not horrible. Kind of fun just to do little projects like this. You could do these projects with your kids or your grandkids on a rainy day. Just get a piece of leather, cut out some sort of a fun shape, and then just allow them to do some stitching around it, just for fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's the thing whenever you're working with kids is we as grown-ups want to try to make it perfect, but really the big deal is the kids should just have fun. They should just have fun doing it. You can really hear that slow gear working. It's working very, very hard to slow me down so I don't goof up as much. I'll still goof up, but I don't goof up as much. It's fun. Perfect music. I think I'm going to leave the mouth alone. So this is what I did just for fun. So this is what I did just for fun. Kind of stitched around the eyes a little bit. Here I went off course, but I could fix that by getting out my X-Acto and just getting that eye out a little bit bigger. But it just kind of just to do a little bit of stitching and really, again, we're not going to be selling these on eBay or Etsy. We're just doing it to get a feel for how the machine is running. How is it managing a stitch off like this? All right. What I'm doing, pause this music for a second. As the day progresses, there's more gas on that pipeline that's coming out to all the different avenues. It can put a little bit of a strain on things. So I'm going to stop the music because that draws on the bandwidth as well. And we'll do this last stitching around and we'll call it a day. Machine run. And we'll consider this our final sew off. I'll go all the way around as best as I can. Gosh, I don't know if I'll try going up into that stem. Maybe I'll give it a try if I feel real adventurous. Here we go. Yeah, went way wide there, way wide. Get back on the edge, buddy. Get back on the edge. All right, let's see if we can use that. Well, I was going to say I could even hand turn this through there. That might be a better choice, but and it's trying to move away the needle, so a little bit tricky. Do best. Isn't it? We got a final result that's kind of quick. A couple of exact and for Halloween, for harvest, you can do a fun little project like this, and they'll remember that. They're not going to remember the right, wrong, and the less than perfect. That they had fun doing it with you. There's where I went way off course down here. But again, you can correct a lot of these things by just trimming the leather a little bit, can't you? And really downsized considerably. And the result was we got some really, really good. I didn't trim that one all the way. We got some really good looking stitching with this as well. It's just a fun project. Simple little project to kind of goof around with. And it shows you the control and the maneuverability. Part of this with the slower, part of this with regulating the speed through the foot controller. And again, whenever you're working with a layer of anything, it can be leather, it can be cotton, it can be canvas. You got a good result here, and we had a little bit of fun doing it. Plus, put the machine to the test. It's the big deal. Yeah. So between but we got some great results with our 100% cotton, our veg tan leather. And that camera's having a lot of trouble right now focusing on that yellow thread against the light background, but you can see it. We did this one as well. We didn't expect it for it to go quite this long, but there's a lot of stuff we have to cover going back and forth between these still shots, going to the machine again, and just getting a feel for the process. The process takes time, and it takes time to present the process as well. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking in here. Many of you from the start all the way to this end. And I'm so grateful for your encouragement, support, and that you're a part of this process as well as we get to this finish line and we can see this machine do its magic finally down at the needle. So take care. Happy harvest. Happy Halloween. And we'll be in touch soon. Take care.